If the room could come to order, please. Hi, all. So I'll start with some prepared remarks. Having consumed your end-of-day eating and found your favorite seating, prepare for the torrent, 17 articles in your warrant. Let's kick off our special town meeting. We have 9 from our own Board of Planning and 1 about plastic bag banning. Will our bylaws be reversing? All the men who are now person? All captured on cable access programming. Our officials are prepared here below, following rules laid out so long ago. The town clerk will be noting all your amending and voting, so it's time to get on with our show. Welcome. Now the meeting will come to order. As most of you know, I'm your town moderator, Bob Hiss. Welcome to this annual fall town meeting. Having been advised by our town clerk, Susan Galvin, that a majority of town meeting members are in attendance, I hereby declare that a quorum is present for the transaction of business, and this meeting is now open. In keeping with our tradition, we'll start our meeting with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Will the membership please stand and join in with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before proceeding with the business of the meeting, however, there are certain preliminary matters to be taken up. Let's see. Could you turn up your microphone a bit? Sorry. I see someone running in the booth. I'll keep talking and see if the volume, give me a thumbs up if that's better for you now. That's better? Okay, thank you. So first, permission has been requested for certain members and personnel of the school committee, planning board, board of health, and other boards, committees, and departments who are not town meeting members to sit on the floor with other members of their respective boards, committees, and departments, upon the understanding, of course, that they will not vote. Hearing no objection from the body, such permission will be and hereby is accorded. Second, permission is granted to Milton Cablevision to to televise these proceedings. Also, please note that there are 2 side-by-side microphones here and over here, each with 3 seats in the front reserved for those waiting to be recognized to speak. Third, I'll now entertain a motion to continue to use the rules for the conduct of our annual town meeting on May as the rules for this meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is unanimous. So with that, let me briefly explain tonight's schedule. Tonight's session will begin with a statement from the Director of Veterans Services, which I will read right now. And this is Kevin Cook, by the way, who could not be here tonight. 2018 Veterans Day Observance Press Release. The Town of Milton and Milton Veterans Services are proud to announce this year's Veterans Day ceremonies, which will be held on Sunday, November 11, 2018, at 11 a.m. on the lawn in front of Milton Town Hall. Milton's Board of Selectmen and Veterans Services Officer Albert L. Williams, along with members of the American Legion Post 114, will conduct ceremonies to pay tribute to our veterans. This year's ceremony will commemorate the 100-year anniversary of Armistice Day, November 11th, 1918, bringing an end to World War I. Michael Devon, a Milton native and a U.S. Marine Corps major, will be the event's featured speaker. The ceremony honoring all veterans will begin promptly at 11 a.m., preceded by a procession from Milton High School down Canton Avenue to the Town Hall, beginning at 10:45 a.m. If you should have any questions regarding this year's observance, please contact Milton Director of Veterans Services, Kevin Cook, at 617-898-4939. We also have 4 elected officials have requested to speak with you briefly tonight. We have Congressman Stephen Lynch, Senator Walter Timilty, and Representatives Bill Driscoll and Dan Cullinane. We'll start with Congressman Lynch.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening. Mr. Moderator, thank you. I know there are a few things on the warrant this evening, so I'll try to be as quick as possible here. I do want to take an opportunity just to provide a brief update on what's been going on in Washington, D.C. Hello? Okay. Okay, I won't start all over again, but we've been fighting airplane noise for a while here in Milton. We've been offering measures in Congress as well as here at the state level to deal with that issue. And while it's been a slow and daunting process, there has been a number of developments that I did want to note. Last year, at the end of the session, I had introduced the Air Traffic Noise and Pollution Expert Consensus Act, which was a bill to require the FAA administrator to sponsor an expert consensus report from the Health Division of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. What this would do is this new system that they've come up with, this next-gen RNAV system that has all of the planes fly over the same bit of airspace and the same houses over and over and over again during the course of the day. We're asking them to study the health impacts of that new system. So under the bill, the National Academies would have convened a Committee on Health and Environmental Science experts to examine the various health impacts of air traffic noise and pollution within 30 days of enactment. Last month, they did not give me everything that I wanted in the FAA Reauthorization Act, but they did modify my proposal a little bit. Last month, the House passed the 5-year FAA Reauthorization Act, and part of the bill, following my model, requires the FAA to review the relationship between aircraft noise exposure and its effect on communities around airports. Not just Logan Airport, but the FAA gets to pick, I believe, 6 international airports across the United States. It will require the FAA to enter into an agreement with an institution of higher education to conduct a study on the health impacts of aircraft noise on residents who are exposed to a range of noise levels from such flight. That would be us in Milton. The study must be specifically targeted to examine the effects of noise on sleep disturbance, blood pressure, and other health issues. Furthermore, part of an MOU that we had signed a while back, Senator Timothy, well, he was State Representative Timothy at the time, flew down. We met with the FAA Administrator Huerta, and following that meeting, FAA and Massport signed an MOU and a statement of intent to try to mitigate the noise over communities surrounding Logan Airport. And they also did some other national airports as well. But this was part of a commitment and a memorandum of understanding entered into by Massport and the FAA with myself, Congressman Capuano, both of our U.S. senators, and Catherine Clark. What happened was that part of that MOU envisioned the use of these vortex generators, which are used to decrease the decibel levels of these aircraft on landing. And so a few weeks ago, we had an announcement by JetBlue that they will retrofit its entire Airbus fleet with these noise-reducing vortex generators. Absolutely, yeah. So these devices work by disrupting the flow of the wind over the air vents on the plane's wings, which prevent them from producing a high-pitched whistling sound on landing approach. And while I'm thankful for JetBlue's initiative, but that's not going to get it. It's the repeat flyover over certain towns and certain neighborhoods that is creating this problem. So while we are happy that they are doing that, and we are encouraging all the other airlines to do that, that is not the end of the story. There are health effects from jet fuel pollution as well as the noise. So we're going to keep on fighting, and we're not satisfied with that change. Ultimately, it's the FAA that has to re-engineer their next-gen RNAV guidance system and begin to respect the health and well-being of residents that are impacted by airplane noise. So again, we have to keep fighting. I do want to thank Walter Timothy for his work, and also State Rep Bill Driscoll for their advocacy and commitment, as well as Mike Capuano. Mike lost his re-election bid. We will have a new member of Congress representing part of Milton, Ayanna Presley, who has been a very, very strong advocate on health issues generally, and I am sure she'll be a wonderful partner and advocate on behalf of the town of Milton and the United States Congress. Again, Senator Milton and I met with the FAA administrator to demand a public forum in Milton. A while ago, they had originally reneged, so we're going back again. Now that there's been some changes made, we think it's time for another community meeting here in Milton so that we can continue to hold their feet to the fire. I know Walt has done great work with Joan Moschino as well down in Hull. And last month, the House here passed the this is another bill that we did down in Congress. We passed the Financial Technology Protection Act, which I led with Congressman Budd from North Carolina, which addresses the threat of terrorists and criminal actors that are relying on digital currencies. So that's another bill that I had passed, but also I want to give credit to my Republican colleague for his co-sponsorship. I also recently introduced a bill to oppose the Trump administration's attempt to privatize the United States Postal Service. This bill would provide that Congress would ensure that the U.S. Postal Service is not subject to privatization. And I'm happy to report that it's currently co-sponsored by 182 Democrats and over 50 Republicans. So we're hopeful that the Post Office, which is the most trusted government agency in America today, according to the Pew research, and we think they're doing a great job. On September 26th, the House passed its second minibus bill, which includes significant funding for our Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, and Education. The agreement will provide $150 billion for military personnel, which will fund a total of 1,338,000 active duty forces in FY 2019. It will give $6.7 billion to address substance abuse and mental health, which includes $3.8 billion directly for opioid abuse. It also provides $34 billion for the defense health care programs, including $125 million in unrequested funds for traumatic brain injury and psychological health research. We're finding that a lot of these young men and women who have done repeat tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan have delayed psychological trauma as well as traumatic brain injury. I'm also happy to report locally on September 7th it was announced that the Milton Fire Department will receive $116,000 from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for an Assistance to Firefighter grant, and I want to congratulate Chief John Grant on this funding. He did a great job with the grant requests. They're not easy, and they're fairly complicated, but he did a wonderful job. This grant will be used to purchase new protective clothing and gear for firefighters, which is critical to keeping our firefighters safe with the newest and the best equipment available. Thank you. Now, Milton has a proud tradition of students attending the military service academies, and I'd like to recognize some of the current and past attendees. Griffith Hiss, United States Air Force Academy, class of 2016. His parents are Robert and Mary Hiss, 273 Adams Street in Milton, also graduate of Milton High School. Luke Glinsky, United States Air Force Academy, parents Ed Glinsky and Denise Keneally, 378 Adams Street, Milton, BC High. Graduate. Michael Byrne, United States Naval Academy. His parents are Robert and Rachel, 38 Deerfield Drive here in Milton. Matthew Lutch, United States Naval Academy, 440 Harlan Street, St. Sebastian School graduate. Matt Walsh, United States Military Academy. Parents are John and Ann Walsh, 702 Blue Hill Avenue, Lawrence Academy. These are all Milton kids. Michael Myrn, United States Naval Academy. Parents are Kevin and Donna, 37 Sheridan Drive. He was a BC High kid. That's a lot of young men and women who that's a real credit to the town of Milton. I have very few towns that come close to the number of young men and women who you've sent to the military academies, and it's an honor for me to be part of that process. I want to thank you all for your participation in town meeting. This is really where the rubber meets the road. This is where democracy happens. It's an unbelievable pleasure and honor for me to represent you in the United States Congress. May God bless the town of Milton. I hope you finish everything tonight because there's a baseball game tomorrow night. And may God continue to bless these United States of America. Thank you.
Senator Timilty.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I may have to lower the microphone a little bit. I'm not quite that tall. But good evening to you all. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to this distinguished body and to this town, the citizens of this town, for the distinct privilege of working for you in the State Senate in conjunction with Representative Bill Driscoll, Representative Dan Cullinane, my colleagues in local government, and of course our wonderful Congressman Stephen Lynch. My first recollections of this body date back to 1974, when my father was first elected as a town meeting member, and I would attend occasional meetings with him. Back then it was on a Saturday in March. But of course the issues are far more complex now. They truly are, and as was alluded to earlier by Congressman Lynch, airplane noise has been a major part of everything we in public life tackle and address since December of 2013, when the next-gen system of flight plans was foisted upon us. It is a horribly inequitable system, and it has been foisted upon the residents of this town and the region. I would like to give you all a brief legislative update on what I've been working on in the State Senate, and then I will wrap up with this horrible issue that we have dealt with in this town. We've dealt with it with courage and with poise, but nonetheless, it is still there for reasons beyond our control in many instances. As far as the budget goes, specifically the monies I've secured for the town of Milton by way of amendments that I have filed in the annual budget exercise for FY19 were specifically $30,000 for our substance abuse coalition in this town. A substance abuse coalition that I might add is doing wonderful work. Secondly, funding for the planning and development of a teen center in the town of Milton, $30,000. Third, $30,000 for new street hockey boards for the town of Milton, and I thank Town Administrator Dennehy for collaborating with me with his intricate knowledge of hockey and the hockey business as what the price tag would be for these boards. Fourth, Blue Hills Trailside Museum, $300,000 to keep this institution, which I as a child benefited from, open. It was desperately in need of finance, and of course, every single amendment that was adopted in the Senate that I filed and advocated for, in order to make it into the final version of the FY19 budget, the House of Representatives has to concur. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And fifth, improvements to the playground at Kelly Field for $30,000. Our playground planners in this town have done wonderful work. Amazing what they've done for fundraising to refurbish our playgrounds. And obviously, it's incumbent upon us in government to do everything we can to work with the wonderful citizens groups we have here in town. Moreover, in the economic bond bill, $2 million, an amendment I filed that was successfully adopted for dredging and waterfront infrastructure improvements. Furthermore, the environmental bond bill, and obviously the environment is the most important thing that we as a nation ultimately work on, for without our environment we are nothing. $208,000, $683, forgive my repetition there, for Cunningham, Collycott Woodland Basin. Adams and Pleasant Street stormwater drainage, $158,283. $104,813 for Milton Police Department stormwater consolidation. $900,000 for the Milton Recreation improvements. And I must thank our Town Administrator Mike Dennehy and all our department heads for collaborating on me and providing me with the right-on price estimates for the amendments that I filed. Now, in regards to policy, I was proud co-sponsor of and was proud to vote for the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, Senate Bill 2093. And of course, the House of Representatives had a similar companion piece. It is now, I'm proud to say, law. This legislation, approved unanimously on June 22nd, 2017 by the State Senate, adds pregnancy to existing employment discrimination laws prohibiting employers from firing or discriminating against pregnant or nursing employees. In addition, this legislation requires employers to provide certain accommodations to expectant employees, including time off following childbirth, assistance with manual labor, a modified work schedule, and more frequent or longer breaks without fear of repercussion. Legislation, I might add, that was long overdue. Furthermore, in conjunction with the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, led by our Fire Chief Jack Rand and the Professional Firefighters of Mass, I filed legislation, an act relative to the creation of the Commonwealth Technical Rescue Regions and Coordinating Council, Senate Bill 1380, which, by the way, the House of Representatives concurred with in the waning days of our full formal session in late July. So, Rep. Cullinane and Rep. Driscoll, thank you very much for your advocacy and the advocacy of the House of Representatives. Technical rescues. This has been monitored on our hazardous material team, which Deputy Fire Chief Brian Linehan is an integral part of in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Technical rescues involve extreme hazardous situations where an individual has become perilously trapped, depending on the severity of the situation, high water rescues, trench cave-ins, and water rescues. Now, the Fire Department of the City of Boston and the Fire Department of the City of Worcester are the only municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that are equipped to handle such crises. Small towns cannot handle these crises on their own. Therefore, we've created 5 regions with this legislation that will pool their resources to respond to such crises. As the co-chair of the Senate Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight, I am also the co-chair of the Special Commission on Public Records Commission, which is examining the exemption currently that the legislature, governor's office, and judiciary enjoy in terms of requests for public records. Obviously, we need to be more transparent, and we will be. This commission that I co-chair will be offering recommendations by December 30th of 2018, which will be filed in the form of legislation in the following session to be acted on. With these 5 bipartisan commission hearings that I've co-chaired, Common Cause, ACLU of Massachusetts, Mass Newspapers Association, Mass Clerks Association, Mass PIRG, and Mass Taxpayers Foundation have all offered input. Now back in conclusion, to be specific, I have and will continue, in conjunction with my colleagues with Congressman Lynch, Representative Driscoll, and Representative Cullinane, continue to attend and testify at public hearings to advocate for Milton regarding airplane issues. And so far, I have advocated in conjunction with Congressman Lynch and my colleagues here at the state level with the FAA and with Massport. Congressman Lynch and I, in December of 2015, hosted a forum here at the Milton High School where the FAA actually came in, the regional officials, and faced questions, listened to the frustration, and provided some answers. However, the answers were not satisfactory, and they're still not. We understand that more needs to be done on this issue, but I can assure you that every single one of your elected officials is doing everything in their power to move this issue forward. In addition, I, along with Representative Joan Moschino, founded the Fair Skies Caucus. The objective of this caucus is to bring together state senators and state representatives whose districts are disproportionately affected by airplane noise traffic and the subsequent deleterious byproducts of excessive noise pollution. The Fair Skies Caucus currently has over 30 members, and we will continue to collaborate with one another to find a solution for our community and our residents who are harmfully impacted by this. And most importantly, in the Senate FY19 budget, I filed an amendment to conduct a study regarding DPH airplane noise impact to the town. The amendment is a study, and by the way, a companion piece of what Congressman Lynch filed down in the Congress, which he alluded to earlier. So thank you very much, Congressman, for your collaboration, and what a wonderful idea. But specifically, this amendment is a study of the health and noise impacts of airplane flight impacts on affected resident communities that are represented by the Massport CAC Committee. Furthermore, this study will examine the health impacts of airplane flights on residents comprising the Massport CAC. Moreover, this study will consider in particular the health impacts on residents comprising the Massport CAC living partly or wholly when the vicinity underneath the flight path most frequently used by aircraft flying, including landing or during takeoff. This amendment was successfully adopted by the Senate budget back in May of 2019. Unfortunately, it did not survive the conference committee, but I can assure you that I will be refiling this again in January in conjunction with my colleagues in both the House and Senate. Which brings me to my final point. With the conclusion of this session in early January of 2019, we will be undergoing bill filing period in both the House and Senate in January of 2019. And with that, I will encourage each and every member and resident of the Senate district that I represent, the Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth, and of course the residents of this town, to please, we are a free petition state. Please bring forward your ideas, your suggestions. I welcome them. They make me a better legislator. I can assure you of that. The suggestions, the input, the criticisms, they will all be incorporated into bill filing. They are welcome, and I ask you please to not be hesitant to pass along your suggestions. And I, in conjunction with my colleagues in the legislature, will be most happy to incorporate them into bill filings. And with that, I will never forget the ultimate premise that we all work for you folks here in this audience and in the general public of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to working with you in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you.
And Reps Driscoll and Cullinane, you're coming together, or? Yes, we are. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, town meeting members, for the opportunity to give a little bit of a legislative update tonight. Try not to be too redundant with what you've already heard, but cover some noteworthy items from the last legislative session since I was last before you at town meeting and since the governor has signed them into law. One of the items is the extreme risk protective orders passed earlier this year. We joined with colleagues, Rep. Cullinane and myself, to establish a process for family, household members, or licensing authorities to petition the court for extreme risk protective orders for individuals who pose a risk of causing bodily injury to themselves or to others by owning, possessing a firearm. An ERPO, if issued by the court, is in effect for up to 1 year and results in the immediate suspension or surrender of all firearms and ammunition. So we heard from a lot of community members, a lot of students, younger people advocating for this. It was great to strengthen the Massachusetts gun laws once again. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, to underscore that one more time, was unanimously passed in the House and offers increased workplace protections for expecting parents. Among other provisions, an employer would not be able to fire or deny a job or demote someone because of a pregnancy-related accommodation being made. Locally, you heard about the funding that was secured in the budget process for the teen center, for a place for our young people to congregate and grow together. We were very proud to see that pass and stay in the budget for fiscal year 19 and to help with the design process for that for Milton. We've been working to hold state agencies accountable. So liaising with MassDOT or Massport, for instance, MassDOT on the various projects that are either actively underway or in the planning process, working to make sure that necessary changes happen at Chickatawbut Route 28 intersection, which now has a project number, working with the town administrator, Mike Dennehy, and his team to make sure that we're on top of MassDOT for that planning and for projects like Squantum Street and Granite Ave that are underway now. Rep. Cullinane and I have been on top of Massport for the airplane issues that you've heard about tonight, making sure that they're sharing data with the town in terms of what's going on with planes. Some of the data was held back for a period of time, but it's public information. We made sure that the town got it, that the advocates, the appointed people that are involved with the Air Noise Advisory Committee had that data at their fingertips to look at what's changed since the changes have been implemented federally. I do want to underscore before I turn the mic over to Rep. Cullinane the importance of that JetBlue announcement. While it's only one company and we hope others will follow, it's a major win for the advocates in town, for the Board of Selectmen that have been advocating this for years. This is not just going to help Greater Boston and Milton, but it's a national change of about 140 planes and $1 million plus investment from JetBlue. So it's a major, major win for the community like Milton that has been advocating to change the noise levels coming over our town. So again, the fight's not over. There's still much to be done, as the congressman and senator said, but make sure that you take a second to realize the type of victory that we've just had.
Thank you very much, Bill. For those I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Dan Cullinane, and I have the honor of being state representative for Precinct 1 and Precinct 2 in Milton. And just before I get into a little bit of the notes, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for what you do for the town, for coming out, for getting involved, for serving, whether it's in the capacity as selectmen or on the committee or being here tonight to weigh in and make the town better. You don't get enough credit for stepping up and serving, but it really is what makes this town work. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. One thing that we did this year that was a very big deal and got a lot of coverage was what was called the grand bargain, if you will. But that probably has a very significant effect across the Commonwealth for low-wage workers, for folks in need, and really was something that came up with to be a solution. And so I just wanted to run through a couple of specifics on that because it's such a significant deal. And that's with the minimum wage, where we joined California, New York, and Washington, D.C. in going up to $15 an hour as a minimum wage. Over the course of 2019 to 2023, it goes from 12 to 15 gradually. For tip minimum wage at $3.75, it goes up from $4.35 an hour to $6.75 between 2019 and 2023 as well. And then a very significant part of this is something that we all worked hard on. from Rep. Driscoll, from Senator Timilty, to your selectmen, and to everyone weighing in, is the issue of paid family leave. And so you'll get 12 weeks if you need it, 20 weeks of paid medical leave, 26 weeks relative if you're dealing with issues around active duty deployment. And you can use this to care for a family member with a serious health condition, a child in the first year of birth or adoption, and around active duty for our service members that may be dealing with a serious illness. And so you can use the paid medical leave to take care of your own health issues, but this is about family medical leave so that you can care for your loved ones, which is incredibly important. And so as part of that also, the sales tax stays what it is at 6.25% instead of getting rolled back to 5%, and that money coming out of the tax coffers that we need to do so many things like we're seeing in the town of Milton. And as a result of that, you also get the permanent sales tax holiday as the other side of that. And so also as part of my remarks, I just want to say a thank you to the selectmen, to Bill, to Senator Timilty, to the congressman. How nice is it to see the Hendry's building finally on the ground? It's incredible. And so many people in this room and across the town had a hand in that. And so whether it was an easement piece of legislation that I know Senator Timilty filed as a rep and the late Senator Joyce, and we co-sponsored, and getting that done so that we could work with the trolley to get that done, was proud to be involved in some small way. But the folks in the town that have been battling this forever, hats off to you, because it is a great feeling that that's now on the ground. And then I'll close with an issue that's very important to me, but very important to all of the elected officials, the selectmen, the chairman, to town moderator, everyone, is the issue of the trolleys, the Mattapan trolley, part of our living history that was put on the table for discussion of elimination, and we rallied to make sure that not only were they preserved, but that they were invested in, because it has to work, right? And 5,000 people daily rely on that to get to the red line, to get to work. It serves the entire line from Mattapan through Milton into Dorchester to get people to the red line. And it was wrong that it was put on the table for possible elimination, and wrong that it was put on the table to possibly have it paved over. Because we see in other parts of the state where living history is preserved, and people have an affinity for the trolleys because it adds character to the community and it functions. And so we rallied together, everyone that I've already named, and we were able to get $7.5 million invested into those trolleys that are being invested this year. And as part of it, there's going to be a study of the whole line, top to bottom, what the bridges can handle for weight, what the future might look like, what vehicles can transport people. Is it possible to get a new trolley with a historic outer shell to keep the continuity but upgrade the kind of vehicle? All of those things are on the table, but there's been kind of delay after delay after delay in the results of that study coming out. And so what was important to me in seeing that, and we know it's election time, and so when something that's very important gets delayed and delayed and delayed to possibly after the election, you want to call attention to that because it's so important to the town. And so we launched a petition that over nearing 1,100 people signed on to basically voice their support for keeping the trolleys, for investing in the trolleys, and making sure that people know that we view it as wanting to preserve our history and to keep that as the service vehicle along that corridor. Because once you pave it over, you can never go back. And there are places that do this and do it well. And so I think that's something that's incredibly important that I've been proud to work on with all of my colleagues and all of my colleagues at the local level as well. And so that's just a handful of things that we're fighting for on the local level. And I'm going to turn it over back to Bill. Thanks.
So while we're up here, we would like to also recognize one of our community members that made a far-reaching impact in the last year and happens to be carrying on a great Milton tradition of leading efforts to care for others in crisis. You may or may not be aware that one of the many moments of history housed right here in the town at the Forbes House Museum is about Captain Robert Bennett Forbes of Adams Street in Milton. He led a humanitarian campaign and voyage in 1847 when he transported 800 tons of food and provisions to Ireland, to Cork, Ireland, at the height of the Great Famine Crisis. Well, 170 years later, Massachusetts turned to Vanessa Calderon Rosado of Milton to lead a modern-day relief effort for a very different island, in the wake of Hurricane Maria, the island of Puerto Rico.
And through the generosity of individual and corporate donors, the Massachusetts United for Puerto Rico Fund has raised close to $4 million. And in just 1 year, it has already distributed more than $2 million to support immediate relief and long-term recovery projects in Puerto Rico and to assist with the relocation of evacuated individuals in Massachusetts. And so we'd like to call up Vanessa, and we'll have Bill read the citation from the entire House of Representatives and from all our colleagues here.
So be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Vanessa Calderon-Rosado in recognition of leading Massachusetts' humanitarian efforts to assist Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for the future and good fortune, continued success in all your endeavors, given this day, the 22nd of October, 2018, signed by the Speaker of the House, myself, William Driscoll, and Rep. Dan Cullinane. Thank you for all your work.
So let's proceed to Article 1, which you will find on page 9 in your warrant. When you get to Article 9, you'll see the bold text is a rather lengthy article. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading. Seconded. All in favor of waiving the reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion is unanimous. So with this, I will now recognize Cheryl Tagayas of the Planning Board, who will speak first.
Good evening, Cheryl Tagayas, Chair of the Planning Board and Precinct 9 Town Meeting Member. This body in October of 2014 approved an article that the Planning Board at that time sponsored, which sought to make a minor revision in one of the height section of the zoning bylaw. What it did, though, was actually eliminate many sections of that height restriction. And it wasn't identified until recently by the town clerk, who brought it to the building commissioner's attention, who then brought it to town council's attention. So what this article does is reinstates language that was inadvertently deleted at that time. There's no revision to that language. While the planning board might like to entertain that in the future, at this time it's just the intent to reinstate that language. It's important because this is where height restrictions are controlled. So most of Milton we think of as having 2.5, 3-story residential buildings, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6-story commercial buildings. This is where those restrictions lie, this section of the zoning code. So the planning board encourages all to please vote yes, so that this language is reinstated. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, all in favor of the article, please signify. Oh, by the way, this takes a 2/3 vote because it's a planning board item. All those in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion is unanimous. Article 2. Again, another fairly lengthy article. Entertain a waiving of the reading of the motion. All in favor of the waive the reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion is unanimous. It's another planning board submitted article, so I'll recognize Cheryl Tagayas to speak. Thank you.
Good evening again. Cheryl Tagayas, Chair of the Planning Board and Town Meeting, Precinct 9 Town Meeting Member. This change is really just who the responsible party is for issuing this home occupation permit. Currently, it lies with the town clerk, who then sends it to the building commissioner, who sends it back to the town clerk. The town clerk and the building commissioner both support changing this and reducing the steps in this process so that the building commissioner is the responsible party. We suggest a yes vote. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? This also requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 3. Folks, we have some yellow pages you should have received or seen at the table in the front. Article 3 has language that replaces what is in your warrant. These yellow pages were submitted to the warrant committee before tonight's meeting. The warrant committee met before tonight's meeting and approved all the language you see in these yellow sheets. So as we go through the articles, I'll point them out. So please, let's look at the yellow articles and not the remainder. So, recommended that the town vote to amend Chapter 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, by adding the following words, and side yard, in quotes, to the title of Section 7K, as well as adding the following language to Section 7K following the word area, in quotes. In the side yard setback area adjacent to a street of a corner lot, as required in Section 6, subsection C3, for lots in residence AA, A, B, and C districts, no motor vehicle may be parked except in a driveway or contiguous parking area, provided that no such driveway and contiguous parking area, if any, shall separately or in combination cover more than 30% of the setback area. In this context, a corner lot means a lot which borders the intersection of two streets or ways. So as amended, Section 7K shall read K. Parking in the front yard and certain side yard setback areas in residence AA, A, B, and C districts in the front yard setback area of a lot, as required in Section 6, subsection B, paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 for lots in residence AA, A, B, and C districts, no motor vehicle shall be parked except in a driveway or contiguous parking area, provided that no such driveway and contiguous parking area, if any, shall separately or in combination cover more than 30% of the setback area. In the side yard setback area adjacent to a street of a corner lot, as required in Section 6, subsection C3 for lots in residence AA, A, B, and C districts, no motor vehicle shall be parked except in a driveway or contiguous parking area, provided that no such driveway and contiguous parking area, if any, shall separately or in combination cover more than 30% of the setback area. In this context, a corner lot means a lot which borders the intersection of two streets or ways. So with this, I'd like to recognize, let's see, Ms. Tagayas, I believe, again.
So this was brought to the board's attention by both the building commissioner and at least one resident. Currently, there's the bylaw that addresses how much pavement can be in a setback, only addresses the front yard setback. But on a corner lot, the zoning code treats both sides that front a street as a front yard. However, the pavement doesn't apply to the second street. So there have been instances, and there's no restriction on pavement in the side yard. So there's no restriction on that one side, which means all of the side yard could be paved. And there's been some concern that that affects the aesthetics of some of our streets. We have a diagram that's going to help explain this. There it is. And because I'm a visual person who likes to explain by pointing, I'm going to stand to the side. So in this particular case, we have 123 XXX Street on the right. So the current zoning requires no more than 30% of that, which is in the hatched area, kind of red up there. No more than that green area facing XXX Street can be paved. Currently, the green area on the top for that street has no restriction on pavement. So what this bylaw would do would treat that like a front yard, like it does in other requirements in terms of where a building can be built, to restrict how much of that side yard, front yard can be paved. Okay, now the language revision itself, there was some question about whether the language was also requiring a restriction on the side yard on the bottom. That's not the intent of this bylaw. There are many cases in Milton, particularly in the Residence C district, where there's pavement that goes back to a rear located garage. And so if we restricted that, then that would put hardship, we believe, on many properties in those districts. So we're looking with this bylaw just at the corner lots. And so the language that was changed and approved by the warrant committee earlier addresses that by adding some language that says it's the side yard adjacent to a street. So with that, the planning board suggests that you vote in support of this, but I'm also happy to take any questions.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, sir.
Lee Michael McLean, Precinct 10. Would the planning board just verify that the words in the first set of quotes, "and side yard," is what you really want it to say? It looks like the title, "parking in the front yard and certain side yard set," does not, I can't figure out how putting "and side yard" into whatever the original title used to be could be correct.
I'm not sure, Lee Michael, if this answers your question, but we did add the word "certain" before side yard to address the concern that it not apply to both side yards or to all side yards. But that this paragraph K is actually where this restriction is located. So with consultation with town council, we feel this is the right location for it.
Mr. Mullen?
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I think if you want to do that, then you need to make a change in line 2 of the recommendation, the portion that's in quotes, and insert the word "certain."
Are you making that as a proposed friendly amendment, Mr. Mullen? Yes. Could you just repeat that so we can capture it?
In the recommendation on the yellow sheet of paper, line 2, in the middle of that line, the words that are in quote "and side yard" would insert the word "certain" after "and" before "side."
Understood. So you're requesting that, I assume, as a friendly amendment? Yes. Planning board?
The planning board supports that amendment.
Warrant committee? Okay, it's accepted as a friendly amendment. So if everyone understands, so at the very top of your page, the second sentence, in between the word "and" and "side" that's in quote, we'll add "certain." Understood? Okay. Anyone wish to speak to this? Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I have a question on, could you just make it clear to me where the backyard starts and where the side yard begins? I have a corner lot just like this, and I'm curious because my backyard has a stone, a paver patio, as well as a driveway that comes in from the side. So I'm just curious how you're handling people's decks, if they're considered being paved over, if they have a wooden deck above the ground, and how about patios and things like that that they might have on their side property or their back property, because I'm not quite sure where the change, where it begins and ends.
Ms. DeGais?
This article only addresses paving, and it only addresses certain side yards. So it doesn't address rear yards, it doesn't address decks or other structures. That's covered in other paragraphs, and no recommendations for changes to those are in the warrant tonight.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? In that case, it requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the article as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I declare a 2/3 vote. We'll go to Article 4. Again, another fairly lengthy article. Entertain a motion to waive the reading. All in favor of waiving the reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is unanimous. So with that, again, Ms. DeGais, I think you're up.
Okay, I have lots of diagrams for this one. Last year at this time, the planning board proposed an article which we thought would make things easier to address pre-existing non-conforming structures. What it did for the building commissioner and also in his consultation with the chairman of the Board of Appeals was make it more confusing. So what we're looking to do is address this issue again and correct what we tried to do a year ago. So the issue is that many of Milton's single-family homes were built before the zoning was enacted in 1938, and many of them, in some large and in some cases small ways, don't conform with that zoning. So what it means for a homeowner is when they look to modify their existing home, maybe expand it by going upwards, they find themselves needing to go to the Board of Appeal to get variances. So what we were looking to do previously was to allow them to go to the Board of Appeal in a special permit process. That process is a little less onerous, a little less risky, and we feel addresses this common concern in a better way. So now, for me to go to my visuals again. So this is an example home in a Residence C district. You can see the street is on the upper right and the rear yard is on the lower left. And you can see some hatched areas. So the hatched area at the top indicates that that portion of the house is 2 feet taller than what's allowed by zoning. So it's 37 feet tall, and what's allowed by zoning is 35 feet. And then what you can see in the back of the house is that that section of the house is closer to the rear yard than what is allowed by the zoning. So zoning requires 30 feet for a structure from the rear yard, and this house is 26 feet. So if a homeowner wants to add on to this house, they can do things, they can do that conforms with the existing zoning and do that what we call as of right. But if they want to do it that builds on the existing footprint, if you will, then they could utilize this special permit process through the Board of Appeal. Next. So if they did a side addition in this diagram, you can see that it's set 30 feet from the rear property line, and it goes into a portion of the property that's within all setbacks. So this is considered as of right. Go to the building department. Next. But if they wanted to build where they continue the line of the rear of the home, that orange section is within the rear yard setback. So it's not making the encroachment worse, but it is extending it. And to do this, this bylaw would allow you to do this via the special permit process. Next. If they wanted to go up, some people say, well, the building if you said just footprint, wouldn't you cover it? But if you just said footprint, you don't cover a condition like this. So you can go up in height under the existing zoning if you only go 35 feet and you stay away from the rear lot line by 30 feet. But it doesn't allow you to build out to the full footprint of what you have now. But that's as of right. Next. So if you wanted to do this, which is a little easier to construct, where you're building up on that rear wall to go to the second floor, that orange portion now would be allowed by special permit process. I think that's it. So the building commissioner had brought this to us. The planning board felt it was a good idea. And one thing I should note, I probably should have noted at the first article, is that the planning board is required to hold public hearings on these articles, and we did hold public hearings on these articles. We did receive feedback from some, and we've incorporated feedback from some folks that we felt it was appropriate to include. And so we have some additional language on this as well, right? Oh. All right, it made it in before. So the planning board suggests that for the ease of homeowners and going through what can be a stressful process, that this would be something for members to support. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, it also requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Article 5, also a very lengthy article. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading. All in favor of waiving the reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. So this is on traffic mitigation. I think we'll recognize Brian Furs, is that correct, of the Planning Board?
Hi, everybody. Brian Furs, Milton Planning Board member and Precinct 10 Town Meeting member. So I'm up here to talk about Articles 5 and 6, so I'm not going to come up twice. This is basically background for both 5 and 6. So Milton has a traffic problem that's pretty apparent from pretty much any source you can get today. East Milton has a parking and a traffic problem. A bunch of our town needs new roads, and we need 3 new fire stations, arguably. What's the point? So my point is that one of the ways to achieve any of our needs is through P3s or public-private partnerships. And tonight I'd like to discuss traffic and how we can start to take steps as a town through P3s to make traffic less of a problem in our town. Whether large or small, grand or mundane, residential, commercial, or institutional, development impacts Milton. Development can and usually will add traffic, it will add density, and it will usually add visitors to our town. But not all development is created equal or could be treated equally. So I want to present a couple of hypothetical scenarios that will hopefully put some background to this for you. Let's take the Carberry Estate. There's a proposal for this approximately 45-acre parcel that will be extensive and will undergo an extensive process for approval. Ultimately, tens of millions of dollars will be invested, and likely many millions of dollars will be made by the developer. With a project of this size, it will be expected that any impacts on town roads will be mitigated by the developer. And this project is large enough that any associated mitigation costs should be proportional and appropriate for that development. So in this case, hopefully, the development will achieve traffic mitigation goals because it's substantial enough to pay for its own own impact. Now let's look at East Milton. East Milton is largely owned by a number of individual owners and used by smaller individual users, all of whom have their own goals, objectives, and projects. On top of that, East Milton already has known traffic and parking problems and is being studied comprehensively by the town to see what can be done to improve the situation. In East Milton, many individual projects or proposals may not be large enough to justify the costs associated with any real meaningful traffic mitigation. However, if over time a special permit granting authority has the ability to collect impact fees and pool them, the opportunity to make real and positive change could be maximized. That is the idea behind this proposal. The article in front of you provides the special permit granting authority with an option, not a requirement, to accept some or all of a special permit applicant's required traffic mitigation in the form of a contribution to be used at a later date to implement traffic mitigation to which the applicant's projects would otherwise contribute. Looking at East Milton again, if an application came before the planning board for a special permit for an individual use, and the associated traffic impact study suggested that it would be proper for the use to improve pedestrian safety, then the special permit granting authority could theoretically do one of several things. One, it could require pedestrian safety measures that were commensurate with the cost of implementing the use in East Milton Square, and those measures may be effective, but may only be mildly impactful. Two, it could require significant safety measures that may be dramatic, but that ultimately may not be commensurate with the cost of the project, and may ultimately stop the project. Or three, it could accept some or all of the value of the recommended traffic mitigation in the form of a contribution to a fund, and that fund could later offset Milton's cost of large-scale pedestrian improvements in East Milton Square, perhaps suggested or informed by a master plan for traffic and pedestrian calming done by the town. That is the crux of this article. In a place like East Milton Square, real and significant benefits could be made through combining the resources of a number of public-private partnerships, changes that are likely not all possible with small parcel ownership and the propensity for small business in the area. Other communities in the Commonwealth have adopted similar measures, including Dedham, Framingham, Natick, Newton, Marshfield, and Braintree. The Metropolitan and Area Planning Council, or MAPC, has compiled a number of recommendations for these traffic impact mitigation funds, and much of the text of this article was drawn from these communities' bylaws and MAPC. I want to reiterate that this article provides another tool to a special permit granting authority in Milton to improve the town's traffic and parking and make pedestrian and vehicular safety better. The article does not require anything of a SPGA, or a special permit granting authority. It simply provides another tool to promote public-private partnership. Milton needs this, and it will ensure, hopefully, that we can benefit from development here. The articles in front of you, Article 5, basically informs how we would go about treating funds, and Article 6 provides the fund into which monetary contributions could be made. I hope you all consider this proposal, and we look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Mr. Whiteside.
Alexander Whiteside, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. That may be the intent, but you have to look at what it actually says. In the first paragraph, it says that in a planned unit development or an overlay district where a special permit is required, then you have to go through very significant traffic impact mitigation. To say that this is intended for small uses, not small uses that are not covered by our usual, the planning board's usual procedure. The usual procedure is the planning board has full authority to require a traffic study from a special permit applicant and has the full authority to require that applicant to provide mitigation. This says that if you have a lot of 7,500 square feet, or new building of 7,500 square feet, which is not a small amount of land, you have to go through these various procedures that are set out here. It does not cover, if someone in the business district wanted to build a large business building, it would not have to do this traffic impact mitigation because it only applies to special permits. It doesn't apply to subdivisions. It wouldn't apply to the Fuller Trust. It wouldn't apply to Winter Valley. It wouldn't apply to Home Inc. because those were not planned unit developments or overlay districts. It would apply to the one overlay district that's being proposed, which is the 6-unit Brook Road overlay. And I anticipate that the developer there would end up spending thousands of dollars to provide all the traffic studies that are necessary. This article should apply to all large multifamily developments and all large commercial developments, not just planned unit developments and overlay districts. You can do that by saying it's applicable to all developments which require site plan approval. And that would sweep in all the large developments. In the second line, it says, where a special permit is required for the construction or alteration of a principal use. The word use is wrong. You don't construct a use. You construct a building. The building can have a use. At the end of the first paragraph on page 2, it indicates that the requirement of traffic impact mitigation is discretionary with the planning board, but it has no standards. It doesn't say when the planning board would require it and when the planning board wouldn't require it. It's just left to the planning board to decide whether or not it wants to require it. They talk about level of service in under development traffic impact standards. Number 1, level of service. They say it shall be determined according to criteria set forth by the Transportation Research Board of the National Research Council. As far as I know, the Transportation Research Board is not a part of the National Research Council. But beyond that, I've asked several times, what are the criteria? And I've gotten no answer. So level of service is going to be determined by certain criteria. I can't find these criteria. I don't know what these criteria are. I'd like to look at these criteria and determine how level of service will be determined. And this is important because this article says that if the level of service of a street or intersection, it can never be less than a C for a scenic road or less than a D for all other roads and intersections, which means that a developer who has a project which is feeding into an intersection with an E, if it's not a scenic road, or a D, if it is a scenic road, can't develop. And I just point out that Canton Avenue or Brush Hill Road, where it meets 138, I suspect is at Brush Hill Road is a scenic road. I suspect that that intersection is a D. This would say you cannot develop anything off Brush Hill Road. They have a definition of impacted intersection. It's capitalized. It's never used anywhere in this article. They used impacted intersections without the capitals, and whether or not it means the same thing is really quite impossible to determine. Under determination of traffic impact, they say an application shall include as compliance with all other special permit application submission requirements. That says that the application, if you file an application for traffic impact mitigation, that is all you need to do to apply for a special permit. That's what the language says. It's not what's meant, but it's what it says.
Hey, Mr. Whiteside, can I interrupt for a question?
Yes.
I'd just like to know what you'd like to propose with your points.
Well,
Do you have specific
I would suggest that this article needs to be sent back to the planning board for more work. And I'd like to move that it be done.
So we have a motion on the floor to refer this article back to the planning board. Is there a second? I hear a second. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the motion to refer this back. Would anyone like to speak to the motion to refer? Mr. Mullen?
Peter Mullen, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I rise in support of that motion. I understand that the Planning Board has a very laudable goal here, but I don't think that this article actually accomplishes that goal. As I understand the goal to be, it's to create a system by which we can capture mitigation funds from small projects and use them to deal with some of the traffic problems that exist in the town. I think that that's something that is doable, but I don't think that this article will do that. If you look in your warrant on page 41, in the section underneath development of traffic impact standards, number 2, the numbered paragraph about an impacted intersection, it applies to any intersection that there will be at least 60 additional trips during the peak hour traffic. That has to be a huge project in order to have 60 increased vehicle into an intersection during the 1 hour, the peak hour. I'd also suggest that you look over on page 44 in the warrant. There's a paragraph up above that talks about the fines. Then if you go down to the bottom of that paragraph, it says, further money paid by a specific applicant for a specific permit under this section shall only be spent on mitigation measures related to said development and specified as conditioned in the special permit. So that you can't pull the money from several developments and use them to deal with a traffic condition in East Milton. It has to be, you have to be able to show that it's specific to that particular project. I understand what's trying to be done, but I don't think that this language does that, and I'd urge that the motion to send it back to the planning board be adopted. Thank you.
Mr. Sloan, coming to speak? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe Sloan, Precinct 10. I had some comments prepared to speak to the article, but...
A little louder.
I'm sorry. I had some comments prepared to speak to the article, but speaking to this motion that's been put forward to send it back to the planning board, I'm not in favor of sending it back to the planning board for a couple of reasons. One is I commend the planning board for the effort that went into preparing this and bringing this to town meeting tonight. This is not the first time that the planning board has attempted to deal with this. We all acknowledge and we all complain incessantly about the traffic problems in Milton, but unfortunately, none of us have really found ways to solve this problem. And this is an attempt on behalf of the planning board to be a part of the solution. We need more solutions. This problem is happening, it's growing exponentially. It increases every single day in town. And this may not be perfect, but so much effort has gone into this up to this point. One aspect of this article that I consider personally the most important aspect of the article is the fact that there's language in the article that's proposed that gives the town a voice in determining the scope of every traffic study that happens in Milton. This is tremendously important because the way the system works now is that a developer gets a traffic study and that's presented to the town via the planning board, and the planning board can get a peer review, but the town is always in a defensive, responsive, reactive position as opposed to a proactive position. And the most important aspect of this article going forward is that it puts the town in a proactive position. And as Mr. Furse said when he made his presentation, the planning board, if a developer presents that this is burdensome, if it's a deal breaker for a project, the planning board can say, we'll waive these conditions, we'll waive these provisions. So there are a lot of details in here, but the gist of this is that the town really needs to take a step forward and deal with this problem. So I urge a vote that does not send this back to the planning board. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to refer back to the planning board? Perhaps Mr. Furse, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to try to address a bunch of the points that were made line by line. So just to sort of touch on what Mr. Sloan just said, this is the third time the town has had this discussion. And in response to that, the planning board, and particularly me, spent a lot of time working with language from 6 different towns that have these guidelines, as well as the MAPC, to draft language that we believe does hold up to most development projects. Just to give some basis for some of the comments that were made. 7,500 square feet was referenced, just to give some scale to that. That's a large home by today's standards, or could be a restaurant as it reflects on a use. But generally speaking, the planning board would love to have language that includes all projects. We had to start somewhere, because typically if we come forward with something that's very general and broad, we don't get anywhere with this, with the town meeting, and for good reason. We like to sort of test things and see how they work before we make them town-wide. So we started with a small sort of purview of what this would apply to. When we heard in the public hearings for this particular article that the town would like to see them apply to a larger scope, we agreed. But we were told by town council, who by the way did review this and brought lots of comments to us, and those comments were incorporated. Town council said that increasing that was out of scope for today. So we would very much plan to bring this back and hopefully apply it to a larger slice of Milton. But for now, we think it's a good start. Traffic studies are already required for any special permit. Most applicants that are coming before us are told they need to provide at very least a traffic memo, and usually, if they're a larger project, a full-blown traffic study. So this doesn't require anything that's not already required by the board. What it does is it lays out the standards that we're expecting the applicants to meet. The level of service was referenced. That's an industry term. I'll get into that in a minute. The planning board discretion was questioned, the fact that we could or could not apply some of these. That has been Milton practice for a long, long time. Historically, the planning board has worked hard to keep its discretion as it writes zoning bylaws. So this was something that we've sort of taken historical precedence to guide us. The Transportation Research Board was referenced in the criteria that the Transportation Research Board sets. This is very much an industry practice. Traffic engineers in Massachusetts rely on the Transportation Research Board criteria that's set. And we didn't cite the specific standards in the zoning because we cited the source for those standards. Those standards may change over time. We don't want the standards in our zoning. We want the source for the standards in our zoning so that as those standards adapt to different conditions of traffic, the zoning will reflect that. A property could absolutely be developed on Brush Hill Road or Upper Canton Avenue if an intersection is currently a D, even if it requires a minimum level of C. What it would require is whatever that applicant is bringing forward would need to bring Brush Hill Road or Upper Canton Avenue or whatever the subject road is up to a level C. Is that a high burden? Yes. That's okay. And finally, can these funds be pooled? I very much believe they can. The way that language is written is that the funds need to be spent on an impact of your project. But if you're talking about East Milton Square, and the argument is that your traffic impacts pedestrian safety, or your project impacts traffic such that we need to add a traffic signal, or we need to widen a lane in order to better facilitate traffic flow, if 4 or 5 projects say the same thing, you can absolutely pool those resources to fix that one problem. Again, that's the intention of this article. We very much believe that it is time that this town take a step forward in working towards public-private partnership to fix our broken infrastructure. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Tagayas. By the way, if anyone else wishes to speak to the motion to refer, if you could walk down now and we'll keep things moving. Thank you.
So I'm going to speak as Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, Cheryl Tagayas. The traffic has been a topic that is brought up for every project that the Planning Board deals with and any potential zoning change. In fact, there are 2 traffic studies underway right now related to potential projects in zoning. One is Milton Village, where the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been studying for some time a potential mixed-use overlay. That traffic study is due to be complete soon, but it only addresses that area. We're also looking at a traffic peer review for a potential project called Adams Court that is being proposed by the Falcone companies. East Milton Square has also been subject to other projects, including the DEC project and Mass DOT projects. We've talked at some time, I think I've said it here, we should look at those projects together. The traffic analyses shouldn't be independent. So the Master Plan Implementation Committee is actually looking forward to what our goals will be next year, and one of the things that we're discussing is the potential for recommending a townwide traffic study. I was on a call today with a traffic consultant from Beta, and I mentioned to him this pending article that we had tonight, and he said other communities are using that type of fund to help fund transportation master plans. So we could use this type of funding, not to have to tap into solely the master plan implementation funds, but a fund such as this that developers would put funds into to help us do our transportation planning, which could include more than just cars, as Brian mentioned, but also bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So we realize that there are some things that could be added to this, but we are supportive of this. We may miss opportunities with projects that are coming before us very soon, and those funds may be lost if we don't adopt something soon. Now, as chair of the planning board is not in support of sending it back to us for further study.
Mr. Walker?
I think we're all solidly behind the objective behind this article, so I don't think that's in question. But I think that both Mr. Whiteside and Mr. Mullen have raised rather substantive issues with the construct of the language. So I think it might be helpful to hear from town council as to whether in fact the points that they made are in fact problematic or whether they are minor issues. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members,
Please.
the points raised points that, in my opinion, are more a matter of legislative judgment. In my opinion, if town meeting approves this recommendation that's before you, it would be legally permissible. The question, I think, before this body is whether, as a matter of policy or legislative judgment, you agree with those points or you do not. I participated in the deliberation by the Planning Board. All of those issues were raised, among others. The ones that we felt presented a legal problem or a problem that was inconsistent with the intent of the Planning Board were addressed accordingly. These provisions remain because, from what I heard, the Planning Board's reasons were validly stated and, in my opinion, are a legal basis for voting yes on the article, but again, it's your legislative judgment as a town meeting member whether you agree with that or not.
Yes, you'd like to speak, ma'am?
Denny Swenson, Planning Board member. Town meeting member, Precinct 5. I applaud Brian's efforts and anyone's efforts to try to address traffic. And I think a mitigation fund geared toward mid-size and smaller developments is an excellent goal. The reason I voted against this article when it came before the Planning Board was that it seemed as though the language could use more finessing. I think the concept is good. I think the intentions are good. Another reason that I voted at that moment in time, the town engineer would be the enforcer of this agreement. The term town engineer is mentioned in no less than 6 times. At the time of our vote as Planning Board, he had not yet been given the chance to weigh in on the language. We've had a problem with enforcement in our town. It's come to our attention a couple of times. And I want to do the best we can as elected officials to work with our town administration and staff in incorporating and making it easy to enforce whatever bylaws we put forward. So part of caring about traffic is getting the language right so that these good intentions can be met. I agree with others who are suggesting that this article go back for further study. Thank you.
Sir, do you wish to speak? No, you don't. Okay. I think our speakers are done. We'll hear from the Warrant Committee on their opinion. You're voting no. Okay. Where's Jeopardy music when you need it? So. Mr. Asher, you're recognized.
George Asher, Chair of the Warrant Committee. By a significant margin, the Warrant Committee does not support remanding this to the Planning Board. We talked about this a lot too, and we had many presentations. It isn't perfect. Nothing is perfect, but it's a good start.
So folks, a motion to refer just requires a simple majority. All in favor of the motion to refer, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The motion fails. So we're now back to considering the motion on the table, which is to approve Article 5 as recommended. Does anyone else wish to speak to Article 5? I see no. Yes, sir, Mr. Mullen.
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. Following up on the statement by member of the Planning Board, Swenson, this article does impose certain burdens on the town engineer. Applicants for special permits will be required to go and talk with the town engineer with regard to any proposed traffic study beforehand, and then after the fact, the town engineer is going to have to certify the studies and any opinions that the town engineer has with regard to whether they're appropriate or not appropriate. I wonder if we could be told whether we have a town engineer that has any experience or background with regard to traffic and how this would be dealt with.
Board of Selectmen, do you have an opinion on that?
Good evening. Richard Wells, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. For the record, past Chair of the Traffic Commission for 10 years, of which the town engineer sits and votes. The town engineer is the one person. If you recall, we made a change in the chairmanship of the Traffic Commission. This body did a year ago, from the chief of police to the director of the DPW, because primarily much of what they do involves traffic engineering, and the expertise in traffic engineering lies within that department, within the director of the DPW and the town engineer. He is in fact the one person, from my own knowledge, that would be the one person that meets the criteria laid out in this article. I will say this to you from that past role. Traffic is truly an issue in this community. Not so much speed, sometimes it's speed, but in every day it's volume. Just the two bridges between the neighborhood Mr. Mullen lives at, the Mattapan Bridge, 68,000 cars a day. The Central Ave Bridge, 20,000 cars a day. The Adams Street Bridge coming in from Lower Mills, another 30 to 35,000 cars a day. That creates a problem of volume, and every time you add to it, you have to find a way to do it. Your Traffic Commission, which is your regulatory commission, is a $0, zero budget body that does yeoman's work each and every year. I'll tell you, as the past chair of that was the most frustrating job I ever had. I applaud them for bringing this far. It may not be perfect, but it is a huge start. And if you read and take your time and read this entire article, you can see the amount of work that they put into getting this to where we are. So I do, in answer to that question, I know it's long-winded. The town engineer is in fact the person. Thank you.
Mr. McLean.
Lee Michael McLean, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I'm wondering why we're restricting funds to only be used on projects or on issues that are created by the building projects referenced here. And I'm concerned that maybe funds would accidentally get trapped in this fund if, say, a mitigation were resolved by some other means. Let's say state money was approved for improving an intersection or something, you know. And generally speaking, I trust the bodies of the town to be able to spend money correctly when it's put into one of these revolving funds. And unless there's a legal requirement for restricting the funds, I would ask that we remove that language, and I can come back to make that recommendation depending on what the planning board says.
Thank you. Mr. Furse? Sorry, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, as I understood the question is there a legal requirement to limit the money in these funds to the stated purpose? The answer is yes. Revolving funds are a creature of statute, and unlike your tax levy funds or others, the purpose of them is to use the money to spend regarding a related activity. Examples of revolving funds that you already have are the school department, the park department, the library. By law, those, you remember last year in response to a legislative amendment that required revolving funds to be in a bylaw, this body voted to approve the text of a bylaw and also a chart. And that chart shows what the purpose of the fund is and for what purposes that can be spent and how much money, what's the cap on the amount that can be spent. So the short answer to the question is yes, there is a legal requirement, and that is the reason why there's a legal requirement, because of the way the statutes are set up. This is a very specific type of financial vehicle for a town, and the advantage is if you receive money for the stated purpose, you can spend it without further appropriation. In other words, you don't have to come to town meeting to spend the money. If you follow the statutory steps, that money is able to be spent for the stated purpose in your bylaw.
Yes, Mr. Furs. And if anyone else, again, wishes to speak to this main motion, could you make your way down and we'll keep things going.
Just to add some color to that, there's also a specific requirement in the MAPC guidelines that specify that the funding that is drawn from a developer be used to offset an impact of the project. So, in other words, if a project is deemed to create a traffic issue on Adams Street, you would need to use those funds to offset that impact on Adams Street. You could do it collectively, or you could do it by taking the money and applying it to a state grant that you already have to supplement that state grant. But it is required to be used to an impact for that specifically is attributable to your project. To the second part of the question, money is also required as part of this, both MAPC guideline and in the bylaw, to be released after a certain point in time back to the developer if it's not used. So therefore, you don't get a situation where you have money you can't ever spend. It eventually expires and you have to give it back to the developer.
So, seeing no other people wishing to speak, this motion requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. I declare a 2/3 vote. Now we're on to Article 6. Let's see, does Mr. Furs, you wish to speak to Article 6, or are we good to go? You already did, okay. I'll let the group know that Article 6 is also covered by a yellow sheet. I'll just assume you'd like me to waive the reading. The one thing to point out is in the table at the bottom, the one change from your warrant is a word has been inserted in the fourth column. It now says traffic safety and infrastructure, so they inserted the word safety, which is the specific name of the, I believe it's the bylaw clause or statute Mr. Flynn says we have to comply with. So, does anyone wish to speak? Yes, Mr. Mullen.
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. In the revised recommendation, the last line of Section A, it says, any interest earned thereon shall be credited to and become part of such fund. I understand why we would want that and why that might be something that would include in a recommendation, but I believe that that's actually prohibited by the statute that authorizes the creation of the revolving fund. I'd ask council to check that.
Understood. Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, the speaker is correct. I apologize for that error. The statute does say, it's Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the Massachusetts General Laws, interest earned on any revolving fund balance shall be treated as general fund revenue of the city or town.
So, Mr. Mullen, would you like to make a specific motion then?
I would propose as a friendly amendment to strike from the recommendation the words, any interest earned thereon shall be credited to and become part of such fund.
Understood. So, folks, if you look at Article 6, the second paragraph, the last sentence, Mr. Mullen is asking as a friendly amendment that that last sentence just be struck in its entirety. Part? Mr. Mullen, does that include the word and? Assume it does.
I think the comment is correct that we should strike the period at the end of the prior sentence and leave the comma and the word and.
Understood. Okay, I'll repeat what I just heard. So, again, if you look at that second paragraph in your yellow sheet, starting the last sentence in the second paragraph, it says Commonwealth. We delete from the period through the word fund, leaving the comma and the and you see at the end of that sentence. So we'll delete period through fund. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, we have a friendly amendment then. Since it's a friendly planning board, do you have an opinion? Yes, Ms. Tagayas, you'd like to speak to it?
The planning board supports the friendly amendment.
Thank you. Warrant Committee?
George Asher, Chairman of the Warrant Committee. We concur. This is fine. Go ahead and do it.
Okay, the Warrant Committee accepts. So we have a friendly amendment. Thank you. Does anyone now wish to speak to this article as amended? This requires a majority vote since it's a funding article. All in favor of Article 6 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The article passes. Article 7 is also in your yellow sheets. Again, it's an extensive article. I'll entertain waive reading of the motion. All in favor of waive the reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay. Then we are off to Article 7 is Ms. Tagayas. I think you're speaking to this. Thank you.
Cheryl Tagayas, Chair of the Planning Board. Planning Board member April Lamoureux is a neighbor to this property. She received requests from neighbors in that neighborhood for the Planning Board to address this dilapidated site. So through her leadership, we have, and I will go through that by standing away again for a moment. So first I'll familiarize you with the site, then I'll go through some of the specifics. So Brook Road is to the bottom, Blue Hills Parkway is to the right, the Food Mart and the auto repair shop are on the lower right. There's an abandoned former fraternal hall towards the upper right corner of the blue shape. And then there's an abandoned residential property closer to the intersection. And then there's a single family. Next one. So this is another view where Laurel Road is on the bottom, Brook is on the right, and Blue Hills Parkway is on the top. Again, this particular overlay is applying to basically 3 parcels. Next. This is what that site looks like now, and it's been like this for some years. People came to the planning board a number of times. We held a meeting at the Tucker School in June. There was standing room only in the library there. There was a lot of interest in seeing something happen to this property. The underlying zoning is RC, which allows single-family residential. These properties are non-conforming in different ways, but nonetheless non-conforming. Next. So this is the overlay boundary. As I mentioned, it includes 3 parcels. They're defined by that blue shape. Next. And this goes through some of the features. So an overlay sits on top of the underlying zoning. It's a tool. It gives the property owner a different opportunity than what the underlying does, but it doesn't take away the opportunity to utilize the underlying zoning. So it gives more flexibility. It also provides a revitalization tool because it's tied to a specific area. Some people say, well, why not a PUD, a planned unit development, which has been used elsewhere in Milton quite frequently. That's a floating overlay. This is tied to a specific boundary. So I mentioned the uses. The new use that would be allowed under this overlay is 6 townhouse units. They would have to be in multiple buildings, so not one continuous building. And with that, there would have to be at least 10 feet of space between those buildings so that the scale could be more commensurate with the surrounding buildings. The height limit would be consistent with the RC, and which is in the residential districts pretty much throughout town, which is 2.5 stories and 35 feet. It would require 2 parking spaces per unit, and the parking would have to be at the rear so that you're not looking at street front of garage doors and driveways. What we're allowed to do when we do these overlays that the underlying zoning doesn't require and doesn't have any real specifics on is to put site design and building design standards in. And it requires us to come back for a special permit, which many know the planning board puts through a very rigorous review with a lot of public input. If somebody develops with the underlying zoning, that process is not required. It also has a requirement for affordable, either an affordable unit or a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There are some specifics in the language which are consistent with other overlays or PUDs that we have, and I'm not going to go through all the specifics. I wanted to highlight what the opportunity is, and if you have questions on the specifics, we're happy to take them.
Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, ma'am. Yes, could you, by the way, could you introduce yourself and your address?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm Jane Bonus. I live at 3 Columbia Park.
Ma'am, could I just remind the audience, citizens are allowed to speak if they make themselves known to the moderator and we verify their voter status, which Ms. Bonus has done. So, ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
All right. I am super nervous. This is something that I'm not at all comfortable doing, but I am here because I'm super committed to this project, and I've kind of been corralled as an unofficial neighborhood leader, or at the very least representative. So I said I live at 3 Columbia Park, which I'm sure 98% of you have never heard of. It's a very, very small dead-end street, the entrance of which is essentially across the street from the property in question. So by definition, the only way in and out of my street is to pass by that and to see it and to look at it many, many times a day, which is not the most desirable situation. It's depressing, it's unsightly, it's unsafe. I certainly don't want my kids, you know, meandering over there. It's, you know, it's dangerous. It's bad. It's, yeah, frustrating. I've lived there for close to 9 years now, and at the beginning, I didn't think too much about it. I said, okay, well, this is a problem, and this is Milton. We're gonna solve it, and here we are. And I was actually stunned to learn about 6 months ago when I started getting involved in this that really it hadn't been addressed at all, from at least what I was told. So I said, all right, it's time for business. Yeah, I'm really just here to advocate a change. I am not here to say this is what the project should be. I'm really glad that there's a proposal up there. It sounds good. I know there are things to be discussed, you know, regarding traffic. I don't know much about traffic plans. I am not a town planner. I'm not in government. I'm not an architect, but I am here to say that the neighborhood is really passionate about this. As was stated, there were efforts made and a call to action to have that meeting at Tucker School, and over 100 people showed up, which was stunning and awesome. And I don't know, I've been to a couple town meetings, and the audience has been like 7, so I would call it a success. Really, it's something that everybody is concerned about, and again, I just use the word sad. Something that actually I think was really brushed under the rug is that a Glover student found a dead body on this property at some point in the not so distant past. That's an elementary school kid. Seeing something that definitely he didn't need to see. I would challenge anyone in this room to say that they would want this across the street from them, around the corner from them, down the block from them. It really just doesn't reflect Milton. Across town from them, this should not be acceptable. This is a gateway to the town. This is a big, you know, these roads come in. A lot of traffic goes through here. You see a sign, it's beautiful, it says, "Welcome to Milton." And then you turn the corner, and this is what's going on. And we're better than that. This is Milton, right? So, yeah, I'm here to say change. This is not an acceptable state of affairs. Please just consider helping us do something about it. Our side of town is tight-knit, and we're loyal, and we are determined, so watch out. And most of all, we're proud. We are proud of our neighborhood. We are proud to live in Milton. We are proud of Milton. We've worked hard to get here, and really, we would just love to see Milton work hard for us. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Tom Callahan. I'm Precinct 4 town meeting member. Full disclosure, I'm also a trustee of the Milton Affordable Housing Trust. However, what I'm about to say, I'm speaking as an individual. I'm not speaking on behalf of the trust tonight. First of all, I want to thank the planning board for their work on this. I think this is an excellent, I'm a neighbor as well of this area, and I think this is long overdue and very welcome. Also want to thank the planning board for their inclusion of affordable housing once again in thinking about this overlay district. I would like to make a change, propose amendment that I hope will be a friendly amendment. Okay. In section 5, affordable housing, it reads, an applicant may make a payment. I would propose changing may to shall. It seems like that is the intent, and hopefully that can be a friendly amendment.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Callahan?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Did everyone understand that change? So we're in section 5, first sentence. where it says affordable housing, an applicant, instead of may, we'll delete, we'll replace that with shall. That is the friendly amendment proposed. The planning board is conferring. Yes, Mr. Gaius?
That would preclude the developer from providing an actual unit. So we'd suggest that we not accept that friendly amendment.
Okay. Warrant Committee? Is your motion on the floor? Do you accept? The reason I'm asking is the recommendation is actually the motion on the floor from the Warrant Committee. So we consult the planning board who submitted it, but they've got the motion on the floor, so they actually are the body that decides if we take a friendly or not. So.
George Asher, Chair of the Warrant Committee. Warrant Committee does not support that change.
Okay, it's not accepted as a friendly. Therefore, Mr. Sloan, do we have a confed? We'll tell you what, Mr. Sloan, are you going to speak to this friendly amendment topic here, Mr. Corcoran, or?
Yes.
Okay, please fill the void then. So.
Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3. I just read through this article again quickly. I don't see where in the article they have the ability to provide an affordable unit. I think it's silent. So the friendly amendment should say an applicant shall either provide an affordable unit or shall make a payment to the town's affordable housing trust in amount, because currently it doesn't require the provision of any affordability.
Okay, so you'd like to now propose a different friendly amendment. Could you have the specific wording then?
I would say an applicant shall either provide an affordable unit or shall make a payment.
So let me see if I have this right. So again, the same paragraph, an applicant shall either provide an affordable unit or shall, that's what we're inserting in place of the word may. So it would read, an applicant shall either provide an affordable unit or shall make a payment to the town's affordable housing, yada, yada. We're back to the planning board to consider that. Yes, ma'am.
Kathleen O'Donnell, Precinct 7. My suggestion would be the affordable housing language would read, an applicant shall provide one perpetually affordable unit qualifying for inclusion on the state subsidized housing inventory or make a payment to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay, folks, let's pause for a moment while we're wordsmithing this. May I suggest that, is the planning board interested in approaching this? Could we have some exact language, ma'am? Please don't add any more friendly amendments. Thank you.
This is an unfriendly amendment. No, I'm joking. My name's Keith Schleicher, town meeting member, Precinct 4. I just want to say it took a lot of guts for someone to come up here, a neighbor, not a town meeting member, to say what she really felt about the place. If you drive by, I've lived here now for about 6 years, and every time I drive by, I go, that place could be amazing. And it's not. It's a dump. It needs to be razed to the ground and put something beautiful there that represents what this town is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran, I assume you're satisfied with that language, and so you'll withdraw your friendly in favor of the new language that's coming our way, okay? reason I'd like to wait a minute before we have any more comments is so you know exactly what they're commenting on as we have a possibly amended article. Folks, by the way, we do have forms available from me or the town clerk. If you would like to, if you see something you think you'd like to write up tonight, please come grab one of these and you can spend your idle moments writing it up. If we could pause a moment, just because I don't want to have any more commentary without knowing what everyone is talking about here. Are you close, Ms. O'Donnell? Almost, okay. Okay.
Hi, my name is Debbie Elsieby. I'm one of the co-founders and leaders of the Courageous Conversations Towards Racial Justice. We've been meeting for over 2.5 years. Every month we have different conversations. We've showed TED Talks. We presented Thurgood the play here in this auditorium. And we have meetings all over the town, from the Cunningham Hall to the Senior Center to different houses of worship. We actually met at the Church of Holy Spirit in Mattapan Square. It's Courageous Conversations Towards Racial Justice. And we've actually contracted with Debbie Irving, who wrote this book, Waking Up White. Can I just see a show of hands of anybody here that has seen or read this book, Waking Up White? So for me, this book was kind of a transformation in my life. I remember where I was 2 summers ago in upstate New York, sitting on a swing overlooking a lake. And it was one of those 9/11 moments where it changed my life. I just thought, you know, I really had no clue about kind of how I was walking in the world as a white person. And I have so many friends of color, and I had no idea, and we never had those conversations. And now I have had those conversations in the last couple years. And I just feel like for the town of Milton, we've got her coming to town to talk about the book, to talk about racial justice. And I went to see her in Sudbury. I thought, well, before we bring her to town, I want to make sure that she moves me the same way that her book did. And she was phenomenal. She has people talking across the aisle for each other. And the book talks about a history that we didn't really all learn from years ago. It also talks about what we can do. White privilege, it kind of addresses what that is, and what we can do in our schools and our towns. And I think it's just a really good read. And again, she's going to be here in this auditorium, thanks to Mary Gormley and the school department. They're allowing us to use this place on November 19th. It's a Monday before Thanksgiving. And she'll be here from 6 to 9 leading a workshop. So the name of the book is Waking Up White by Debbie Irving and Finding Myself in the Story of Race. And I really encourage, where we're all town meeting members and we represent our constituents, it's really important that we know who they are and how they walk in the world and how we walk in the world, so that we can take the right votes for all these issues that we talk about. So I really encourage all of us. I've kind of gone to the selectmen, I've gone to the school committee, I've talked to all the different organizations, the police department, I still have to go to the library. Anybody that serves people in Milton should read this book or should come to the lecture on the 19th and listen to her and kind of learn a little bit more about how we are. We are in such a strategic location, located right next to Boston. We have such diversity and such a great town, and I think we could do so much better. Like I said, I had no clue when I was reading this book, some of this history, and it really woke me up, and I'm sure there's a lot of us out there that still, are in that world of not knowing. So I really encourage you to come, again, November 19th from 6 to 9 here at the high school. Thank you.
Ms. Hoy, do we have the language up on the screen? We do. Ms. O'Donnell, does this represent your language as you intended it? Yes, it does. Okay. Planning Board, with you, do you accept? If you could just acknowledge, thank you.
The Planning Board is thankful for this catch, and we support this amendment.
Warrant Committee?
Friendly amendment.
Thank you.
The Warrant Committee concurs and supports this amendment.
Thank you. So we have modified language now on the article. Now, anyone wish to speak? Mr. Sloan, Ms. McKittrick, Mr. Sloan's been waiting quite a while. I think he was patiently back there. So, Mr. Sloan, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joe Sloan, Precinct 10. Again, I commend the Planning Board for bringing this before us. This is what we are elected as town meeting members to do, to bring the concerns of our neighbors before town meeting and solve problems. And I strongly urge you to vote to support this overlay. A couple of questions have come up in the past few days that I think I might be able to help clarify. There was, in fact, an effort by the owner of this property to put forward a residential development a few years ago, and he chose to do that through the Board of Appeals, through the variance process. And that met with some resistance, I understand, because of concerns about the scale, the density of what he was proposing, and maybe there were concerns about height. Those have been addressed in this by the Planning Board. As you heard earlier, there was a tremendous forum at the Tucker School where neighbors expressed past concerns as well as their wishes for the future. Another thing I wanted to clarify would help if we could get the satellite image of the site that was in the early part of the presentation.
You got that, Ms. Hoy? Yes? Okay.
Not that one. Keep going. That would work. A question came up earlier today to me because I've been helping the Planning Board move this forward. The question was why the house, there's a house on Laurel Road, it's in the kind of the bottom right corner of that little outline, where the number 3 is, thank you. Why that house was included in the overlay district, because that house is not owned by the same owner who owns the majority of the parcel. And the reason that the Planning Board included that was to set the stage, set the framework for the possibility of a development. This is a very busy corner traffic-wise, and the town's made improvements here over the years. And the Planning Board generally acknowledges that it won't be practical for there to be a residential development on this property using the access that's currently at the top of the screen that brings you into the Milton Food Mart parking lot. So through that variance application that happened a few years ago, we learned that the owner of this parcel had been in conversations with the property owner here on Laurel Road to possibly obtain a portion of that property to provide the access. So the inclusion of that property in this overlay doesn't put any conditions on that property owner. They don't have to sell. It simply enables this process to move forward. In the past, that sale never really materialized because there wasn't really the framework, and this sets the framework for that. Again, this lays the groundwork for things to happen. I did speak extensively with the neighbors in that house over the past week, and they are agreeable to ongoing conversations, and I think that's enough of an encouragement for us to vote to support this overlay. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. McKittrick.
Marion McKettrick, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I support this article, but I have one more friendly amendment, and that is at the end of paragraph 3 in the last sentence. It says individual buildings must be located 10 feet apart from one another, and I believe it should say individual buildings must be located at least 10 feet apart from one another. I'd suggest that I hope the planning board would. Thank you.
The planning board supports that friendly amendment.
You wouldn't be an attorney, would you, Ms. McKettrick, by any chance? So, Warrant Committee?
I'm sorry, it's a lot easier for me to do this than to walk around and trip over chairs again. The Warrant Committee concurs with the amendment.
Okay, so what we now read is again, yellow sheet, third paragraph, last sentence, individual buildings must be located at least 10 feet apart from one another. And Ms. Swenson, I think you're next, I believe.
Oh, thank you.
Or sir in the, no?
Oh.
She would, okay, thank you.
Denny Swenson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 5, Planning Board Member. You know, listening to a neighborhood, So listening to a neighborhood's concerns and working towards solutions together is what we're all here for. And this article and the process by which we got here is, you know, a good example of what good government is all about. So I applaud April and I applaud this neighborhood for reaching out, rolling up our sleeves, and coming up with creative ways to address real concerns together. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Yes, is that in reply to the comment?
To do another amendment. Town council pointed out that the at least language should also be added in paragraph 4, where it says any building permitted under this section shall be set back 10 feet on all sides of property. So it should be shall be set back at least 10 feet on all sides of the property.
I assume you accept
I'd
your...
like to make that amendment and hopefully accepted by the Warrant Committee.
Warrant Committee?
Warrant Committee accepts the change.
Thank you. So everyone, that now reads, again, yellow sheet, paragraph 4, first sentence, any building permitted under this section shall be set back at least 10 feet on all sides of the property. That's our now second amendment to this article. Sir, would you wish to speak to this article?
Yes, I'm Jim Desmond, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4.
Can you speak up, please,
Sorry.
sir?
Excuse me, I stutter a little bit. Jim Desmond, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I had the privilege to talk to the Reverend from the Parkway United Methodist Church, Pastor Johnson, and she supports this 100%. Her property, which is the church, abuts the property that's going to be done. But I do have a few concerns. I remember a while ago when they were discussing the payments for the affordable housing at the Burks Estate, that the planning board didn't have a guideline to go by to see how much their contribution was going to be. And I'm just concerned if this has ever been done before, how much money would be contributed besides a unit, because a unit could go for about $350,000, $400,000. Is, you know, will the same amount be contributed? You know, it's just something. And I've been around for a long time, and I've watched that property disintegrate for a long time. And I'm just wondering if the developer is being rewarded for bad behavior, because there was somebody living in the house. The old, the old KSC was being used until InSync left, and then they went in and they stripped all the aluminum siding off, sold it, and now it looks horrible. it didn't look bad when the aluminum siding was there and the school was there. I know that must have been about 12 years ago, but I'm just concerned that more people will decide to let their properties go and say, okay, because there are a few other areas in town that, you know, don't look so good. And is this rewarding any bad behavior? Because I don't know when this developer bought the property, but if he's the one that had the aluminum siding stripped off, to make it look the way it does, well, I think he's being, rewarded. Thank you.
Thank you. Our planning board is searching for an answer. Mr. Funneling, if you'll pause, I think we have an answer.
So to the question of the value of the contribution, this is a zoning tool. We don't have a particular project proposed yet. So someone could come forward with 4 units, for example. Someone could come forward with the maximum of 6. But we look at what the particular project is, and then we look at what the contribution that would be relevant to that project. So, for example, if somebody came forward with 4 or 5 and said, we're going to do extensive landscaping that provides a public benefit, then we might have a different contribution than if it were somebody who maxed out the property. So that's why the planning board likes to leave discretion, and also the market values change over time, and to put it into zoning would be a difficult thing to have to amend continuously. And then to the point about rewarding someone, that's a tough one, because you heard from the neighbors who live there, and they're the ones who suffer from the fact that it's dilapidated. If these weren't non-conforming, it might be a different discussion. That existing fraternal hall is built pretty much on the property line. So is it really beneficial to rebuild that the way it is in the kind of less than historic character that's left of it? Or is it better to plan for a reuse that could be an attribute to the community and help the neighbors who have asked us to take a look at this for them?
Thank you. Mr. Funneling, you're all done. Okay. I see no one else coming down to speak to this motion. This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the article as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. We are on to Article 8. Recommended that the town vote to amend Chapter 11 of the general bylaws entitled Planning Board and Board of Appeals by adding the following Section 3. Section 3, Planning Board term. Planning Board members elected in and after calendar year 2019 shall serve for a term of 3 years in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81A, added by the Acts of 1947, Chapter 340, Section 4, and any amendments thereto. Mr. Furs, would you like to speak to this article, please?
Good evening, Brian Furs, Precinct 10 Town Meeting member and member of the Planning Board. There are 14 elected bodies in the town of Milton. 3 have terms of 5 years. That's the Housing Authority, the Cemetery Trustees, and the Planning Board. The Planning Board sets land policy that is all but irrevocable once it's enacted and built upon. And it determines our built environment that dictates town character, density, taxability, and much more. And despite these significant powers, planning board members with a 5-year term have less accountability to Milton residents for decisions and actions than the Select Board, the School Committee, Milton and Blue Hills, the Assessor, the Town Clerk, the Town Treasurer, the Parks Commissioner, the Board of Health, the Constables, the Library Trustees, and the Moderator, all of whom have to be reelected by Milton voters every 1 to 3 years. The strongest argument for keeping the 5-year term is the learning curve required to serve on the planning board. But I'd argue that qualified folks serving on the planning board likely have some background or experience in planning, real estate, architecture, civil design, or law. And one opting to run for office is usually paying attention and attending meetings in advance, participating in the process, and learning a lot about it and our town bylaws. Perhaps most importantly, the learning curve to serve on the planning board is arguably not any steeper than that of serving as a member of the select board or being a school committee member, the other boards that are sitting up here at the front of the room. Finally, members of our town board should be running to serve immediately, not ramp up and learn on the town's back. Hopefully we're getting members who are ready to serve, whether they're in their first year, their third year, or their 20th year. So hopefully this renders moot that argument that one needs 5 years to be an effective planning board member. On principle, 5 years is a long time, and a decade, which would be 2 terms, is a very long time. A 2-term planning board commitment is more than a 3-term commitment on the select board and the school committee. Regardless, just as a little bit of background, I did review 289 town websites in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for a cursory review, very quick. And through that very cursory review, I was able to determine the number of planning board members and the associated terms in 206 of them. Of those, 31% are 3 years, so definitely a minority, but not a we wouldn't be the first ones out there. And 68% are 5 years. 1% are actually other, which is odd because you're actually required by law to do 3 or 5. So just in closing, whether you believe Milton is perfect or if you think Milton's ready for change, under this proposal, Milton voters get the opportunity every 3 years to voice their opinion as to whether the town's land policy and development directors are really doing what they're supposed to do in line with your perspective. A 3-year term provides consistency with other town boards, and it's really less daunting for anyone who wishes to volunteer their time, their skills, and their ideas. For anyone that's not exactly sure where the next 5 years, or never mind 10 years of their lives might take them. So we hope, as the planning board, that you will consider this important proposal. Thank you.
Mr. Collins? Not this one. Okay. Understood. Does anyone wish to speak? Yes, Mr. Whiteside.
Alexander Whiteside, town meeting member, Precinct 9. Planning board has, over the past 50 years, been a fairly stable board. Although the membership has changed as some members have chosen not to seek re-election, have failed to win re-election, or have resigned, turnover of board members has been the exception rather than the rule. Many people, myself included, believe that the stability of the board significantly contributed to the town's ability to retain its character. There's been an unprecedented turnover in the membership in recent years as a consequence of retirement, resignation, and contested elections. The board now has 5 members, all in their first term. The idea that now is the time to further shake up the board by reducing the term of service to 3 years makes no sense to me. The town needs board members experienced in administering their duties. Discouraging long-term service on the board is not in the town's interest. My personal opinion is that the planning board members should have a 5-year term. Board members should have general familiarity with the Zoning Act, the Subdivision Control Law, the Milton zoning bylaws, and the rules and regulations of the planning board. They also should have a working knowledge in how the provisions of these laws have been applied in the past and how they should be applied in the future. The board is a semi-adjudicative body, and its members need to comply with proper administrative procedure. A 3-year term would not provide adequate opportunity for a member. who has no prior knowledge to get up to speed. The board has significant adjudicatory duties. In fact, most of its duties are determining applications for one permit, one sort of permit or another. It does suggest zoning, as you've heard tonight, but that is not its principal occupation or principal of the way it spends most of its time. The cost of time and money to run in a contested election is a very significant drawback to any person considering running for public office. A bylaw change to make such a person have to put in twice as much time and money to seek what amounts to the same amount of service, that is, seeking a 5-year term or 6 years with 2 3-year terms and 2 elections, seems to me to be a significant disincentive for the person running for the 2 3-year terms to run for office. No one has ever suggested to me that he or she would prefer a 3-year rather than a 5-year term. I don't think that the board has ignored the public. I think that the board listens to the public and it makes its decisions in a rational, considered manner. If you had 3-year terms, you would end up having 2 members running in 1 year, in 2 of the 3 years, and 1 member in the 3rd year. So the opportunity presents itself if someone has a hot issue to go out and find candidates and come up with, possibly come up with 4 sympathetic members in 2 years. This is real estate, and real estate is money, and developers are interested in making money. Having 5-year terms helps insulate the board against political pressures. The U.S. Constitution gives senators a 6-year term. The thinking was to remove them from everyday political pressures and thus permit a more deliberative approach to issues than can be given by the politically driven House of Representatives with a 2-year term. Although a planning board member is not a senator, he or she has important deliberative responsibilities, not well served by the proposal to provide for a potential complete turnover of the board every 3 years. The proposed reduction in the terms of planning board members would be bad for the town and should not be approved.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? This requires a majority vote. All in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The article passes. With that, Mr. Collins. Yes. Do we have?
I'd like to raise a point of order and request an event.
Can't hear you, Webb. So, thank you.
My name is Webster Collins. I am a town meeting member of at Precinct 9. I'm also a member of the Fire Station Building Committee. I'd like to request an advance of an article, in other words, the Fire Station Article 11, up until now for the very specific reason that the pace of the town meeting, I can't predict whether or not we're going to finish tonight. And tomorrow, regretfully, I'll be on an extensive business trip and unable to attend. So I'd like to request, Mr. Moderator, if we could advance Article 11 to go next.
Okay. We have a request to advance Article 11 to right now. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on this article? Are you coming to speak? Yes. Just a minute, please. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion to advance? It requires a majority vote. All in favor of advancing Article 11 to right now, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes. I will now read Article 11. Recommended that the town
Mr.
vote to
Moderator.
amend the vote of the 2017 annual town meeting under Article 14 by increasing the membership of the Fire Station Building Committee from 9 members to 11 members. The 2 additional members would be the fire chief and a member of the Town of Milton Fire Department, neither of whom shall serve as chair of that committee. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Yes, recognize Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Walsh, Town Meeting Member of Precinct 8 and Chairman of your Fire Station Building Committee. Previously arranged with the moderator to give a very brief report, and he asked me to do that at the beginning of this Article 11. So I'm just giving you an update that we think is important on behalf of the Fire Station Building Committee. It does not pertain directly to the article that will be in front of you. So we wanted to provide a very quick update on an important issue that we spoke to you about when we were last here in front of this body speaking to you. As a reminder, it's our job to bring a plan forward to get approved to build new 21st century fire stations that will serve Milton for generations to come. As we have reported previously, we have a very talented and experienced committee that have been leveraging their skills and in some cases their personal tools very effectively to provide analysis for us. The important issue that I want to speak to you tonight about is, could we bring a 2-station versus current 3-station option to the town to consider? The simple answer is no, and we will not. We felt it was very important to determine whether we could provide the timely and effective firefighting protection with 2 stations versus the current 3. It's key to understand that response time is critical and there are national standards to be met. Our 3-station configuration meets those very effectively. However, we spent a significant effort over many months on this issue because we felt it needed to be thoroughly addressed and firmly addressed for everyone interested in what we were doing with fire stations. So first we looked to see if we could use available space in our DPW yard as part of a 2-station configuration. Because of where it is located, the important need to meet response times, we quickly learned that this would not work. Next, we leveraged some sophisticated modeling tools that member Dan Clark had to tell us where in the town should 2 stations be located in order to provide the most sufficient coverage, regardless of who owned what land. Where are the best 2 spots in the town of Milton if you to provide just 2 fire stations? Ironically, the model told us that land extremely close to the current Atherton Street station in an open parcel of land at the corner of Brook and Center Streets was also extremely close to the sites identified by the model. This property at Center and Brook is owned by the cemetery. We worked with the cemetery trustees, the Conservation Commission about possible wetlands over a period of a few months looking into this. We did a lot of modeling for response time to all the existing addresses in the town to see if it could work. We used 5 years of actual calls made by our fire department and modeled those against these 2 sites. It appeared to us to be very close to meeting the guidelines. Consequently, we then sought out and hired a firm with great expertise at this to do their own modeling and provide us the results. They did an excellent job. They alerted us to some troubling facts. One, we would now be locating our only ladder truck farther away from the center of town, causing real delays in getting this to areas in the western edge of the town, which are currently occupied with things like Fuller Village, Curry College, and other parcels that are most likely to be developed in the future. In addition, they identified 185 of our actual calls made over the previous 5 years, which would now get, which are now currently getting under 4 minutes of response time, and they no longer would meet that. 4 minutes, by the way, is the magic number. The standards talk about having 99% of all of your responses within that 4 minutes. So we now would have 185 homes that we met easily that now with this two-station model wouldn't. Real calls. Another alarming discovery was the burn rate of homes and fires. There are several studies, such as one detailed by Underwriter Laboratories, that conclude people have approximately only 3 minutes now to safely get out of your homes versus 7 minutes only 15 years ago. This is due to, 1, more combustible materials used in home construction, 2, significantly more open floor plans, which allow for a rapid whirlwind effect spreading the smoke, flames, and toxic air much more quickly around a home in a fire, and 3, more toxic materials that are now used actually in construction. So our committee determined unanimously that it would be unsafe to provide firefighting to the town of Milton with just 2 stations, even locating them ideally. Now, there is much more activity and work we have been doing and will continue to do, and we plan to come back before you at this next town meeting seeking funds for architectural drawings. We have, in fact, engaged an owner's project manager, Daedalus Architects Incorporated, that are helping with us with that activity. And this week, relative to the report I just gave you, I will ask the town clerk to email you a link to our website in the hopes that you will spend the approximately 7 to 10 minutes that it would take to watch the video that illustrates that burn rate problem that I just talked about. And it really compares side by side a fire in a more traditional, older home with a newer home with the materials, the open floor plan, et cetera. So I think it's really, honestly, after having been exposed to it, a must-see for every homeowner. Well, I hope you will look at it. And lastly, I want to leave you with a thought. Maintain your smoke detectors when you think about this rapid response time. Thank you for your time and support. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Collins.
I, along with others on our Fire Station Building Committee, am in strong opposition to this article. It is inaccurate and, in my opinion, carries a huge conflict of interest. The statement made, which you will read and I will quote from, in the comments section supporting the article, that the fire chief, quote, is not able to add comment to the proceedings without being asked to do so, end of quote. That is not true. The building committee agenda published a week before each meeting has a section titled Citizens Speak at the beginning of each meeting and the end of each meeting. The fire chief and everyone else are encouraged to participate, and they do so. The meetings are conducted with total openness and transparency, and to think otherwise, I believe, is an affront. What we do is we conduct these meetings under the open meeting laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and follow them to the nth degree. For the fire chief and any firefighter to have a vote is in violation of business and professional standards and canons of professional ethics. I will now list 6 requirements of standards and practice. Number 1, independence. Number 2, impartiality. Number 3, objectivity. Number 4, unbiased. Under 5, highest level of public trust. And number 6, perceived bias can undermine the confidence that the public must have. All of these numbers and these items on this list are direct quotes from handbooks and manuals specifically on this issue. This article passes none of the 6 tests and is in serious conflict of interest with the town, and in my opinion, will divide a very strong committee and may result in justified resignation of committee members. I urge that the town meeting vote to follow standards of professional practice and issue a no vote on this article.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Mr. King? So, Mr. King, if you could announce you. Mr. King is a registered active voter in town. If you could just say your name and your address and then begin your remarks. And by custom, by rule, we'll limit that to 10 minutes, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is John Paul King. How's this? My name is John Paul King. I live at 377 Canton Avenue. When I first heard that Chief Grant had submitted a petition to be placed on the Fire Station Building Committee as a voting member, I resigned from the committee. First, I'd like to address both the uniqueness that was advertised by Chief Grant, and secondly, the inappropriateness of a town employee as a member of the town board, because that is a situation of a conflict of interest. But I think I first should introduce myself. Who is speaking to you tonight? It's kind of like giving who I am as an engineer. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from the Ohio State University and an MBA from Cornell. I served 6 years as a submarine officer and 16 years as an Army Reserve officer. I had a combat tour in Iraq when I was 56 years old. During that tour, I managed $18 million of infrastructure reconstruction, mostly the oil infrastructure of Iraq. As a civilian, I worked at Stone & Webster like most mechanical engineers in eastern Massachusetts. I worked for 11 years at Naval Sea Systems Command, small office in South Boston. And that office took care of all the amphibious ships in the Navy. They're averaged about 28,000 tons. My design team, developed complex engineering drawings for the overhaul of these ships. Those overhauls went anywhere from $500,000 to $5 million. In the last 16 years, I worked as an environmental engineer at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I'd like to address Chief Grant's argument that he would bring a uniqueness to the Fire Station Building Committee. As a comparison to Chief Grant's uniqueness, I'm going to use myself as a personal example. As I mentioned, I served as a submarine officer for 6 years. The U.S. Navy submarine force for the last 40 or 50 years has averaged just 55,000 people out of the total population of the United States. Does the U.S. Navy press the submarine officers who serve on submarines to design submarines? No. Neither does the U.S. Navy press their pilots or their surface warfare officers. They want those individuals to fly their airplanes, drive their submarines, and maneuver their surface ships. What the Navy does do, it lays the responsibility on its civilian department, the Naval Sea Systems Command, to do the design of the ships, airplanes, and submarines. That Navy Sea Systems Command is staffed by degreed engineers, naval architects, technicians with degrees of experience. In my 11 years working at Naval Sea Systems Command, I never met a sailor from the fleet who was designing any warfare pattern, any warfare platform in which I operated. The Navy's objective was not to have the operators do the design. The Fire Station Building Committee that was constituted by the town moderator consists of experienced engineers, architects, and finance types. The Fire Station Building Committee has access to national fire station design guidelines, plus is being supported by the engineering firm Daedalus, which has a long track record of designing and managing the construction of fire stations. Chief Grant already has been invited to sit at the Fire Station Building Committee meetings. His input has been repeatedly solicited at those meetings, and also in direct email communications and in individual meetings. Each Fire Station Building Committee meeting has had 2 citizens speak to allow other fire department members to voice their opinion and concerns. It came as a shock when Chief Grant announced that he had petitioned to become a voting member of the Fire Station Building Committee. A shock because the committee had made a concerted effort to solicit Chief Grant's input in all the committee's deliberations and investigations. I am not the only committee member in disagreement with Chief Grant's decision to petition to become a voting member of the Fire Station Building Committee. In referencing my example of the Navy not using its operational forces to design its ships, submarines, and aircraft, I am concerned how a fighter whose unique abilities lie in fighting fires and saving human lives would integrate into a committee that is tasked with engineering firm selection, building design, cost-benefit analysis, building cost estimated, historic preservation, bond market analysis, and property tax implications. There are established national standards for engineering, for designing fire stations. The Fire Station Building Committee consists of several engineers and architects who have multi-story building experience, and financiers who have worked on financing such construction projects. Plus, Chief Grant already has been integrated into the committee to review all engineering designs. Therefore, what is the value added for Chief Grant addition as a voting member? In my opinion, none. Chief Grant's focus is running the Milton Fire Department, which he has successfully accomplished in employing the department's unique abilities of fighting fires and saving human lives. The Fire Station Building Committee's more broad focus is facilitating the construction of 3 modern fire stations for the citizens of Milton. The Fire Station Building Committee is optimal, and it should remain as presently constituted. This leads me to my final point, conflict of interest. Based on my personal observation, at least on a national and state level, this nation, our nation, has endeavored to keep both uniformed services, for example, the military and law enforcement, plus federal and state employees off any boards or committees which vote to expend or authorize funds. One never sees an admiral or a general voting in the U.S. Congress, or a state police officer or a fire marshal voting in the Massachusetts legislature. Why at this junction does the Milton Town Meeting find the need to change the normal democratic process accepted for centuries on both the federal and state level? My final observation. Chief Grant has 2 constituents, his employer, the town of Milton, and the fire department. If this body votes to place Chief Grant on the Fire Station Building Committee and Chief Grant votes to expend town funds, will Chief Grant be conflicted between his allegiance to his employer, the town of Milton, or his department? Mr. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you. I was contacted by Gene Sullivan, who's also a registered voter, about speaking of this article. Mr. Sullivan in the auditorium? I think not. Okay, would anyone else like to speak to this article? Chief Grant, would you like to speak as a registered voter? I think that's your status here tonight, so thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Moderator. From the fire department's point of view, this is a pretty simple thing. What we do costs people their lives. Ourselves, people in the public, we have health issues. There's many reasons here that we're requesting to be on this committee. These buildings here will stand for more than likely the next 100 years. We train in these buildings. We have no ability to train in our current buildings. As we go through this, we're learning so much more than we knew even when I started my career. Cancer rates for firefighters are through the roof. This is because of all the exposures that we're faced with. These exposures are in the street. These exposures are in the stations. They get brought back with us from the street to the stations. The next evolution of fire engines will have storage that our members will be taking their gear off in the street, storing it in compartments, bringing it back to the station, having it deconned before it's worn again. The efforts to keep these stations as clean as possible for our health of the members of the fire department are changing on a daily basis. Like I say, currently, we have no training facilities. And again, the job that we do on a daily basis, people don't go home from. You know, there's times that my constituents don't go home. There's times that you that we're tasked to protect don't get up the next day. And there's things that can be missed in these buildings. This is a good committee. This is a very strong committee. But if you look at this building here, it's individual rooms. If you look at the town hall, it's individual rooms. You can probably build those buildings without input from the people that are there. Our job is very unique. We deserve to have a seat at this table. We're not the town hall. We're not a school building. We're not a residence. This is something we feel extremely strong about. And again, this is a strong committee. You know, we're looking to add 2 members. You know, there's no conflict of interest here. This committee will overrule us at any turn. My son just started this job. He's got 35 years ahead of him. We just deserve to have a say in the conditions of the building that are going to weigh into our ability to do our job in the street, to protect our health as best as possible in a changing environment, and to do our best to be prepared to protect you. Thank you.
Ms. Varela.
Sorry. Shayla Egan-Varela, Precinct 8, and also a member of the school committee. I rise to support this article, and I respectfully disagree with the chief that I think that any building in town that is going to service the needs, and I'm being a school committee member, I know in the past of building these buildings this one that we're sitting in, and the others, we were able to have school committee members on our building committee. You know, and as far as I can see it, the firefighters, I mean, they live there. When they're there, they live there. It's their building. So, I mean, I no disrespect to the people who are on it, to say what Chief King said, that there's good people, but it just doesn't make sense not to have firefighters represented on that. And as far as a conflict of interest, all of this will ultimately have to come to the floor of town meeting, right, for whatever is recommended. And he's a town meeting member. You know, you vote on it then as well, as far as the conflict of interest. So I think it's very important to have your representatives on these boards that are going to build buildings in this town for a long time ahead. Thanks.
Any anyone else wish to speak to this article? Mr. Wells?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Richard Wells, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, and I am also the liaison, I'm a non-voting member to the Fire Station Building Committee. I've been in that role, I believe, since July. I do want to say, I want to echo that they are an excellent committee, as Chief Grant noted. They work very hard at this. They take this responsibility very seriously, and someone who spent 35 years and 35 decades, oh my God, over 3 decades in public safety. I appreciate that. With regard to precedent, in 1972 or 71, when we built our last public safety facility in the town of Milton, the town meeting and the moderator appointed a member of the police department to sit as a voting member of that committee. I cannot tell you how many times in my life the former town administrator, John Cronin, told me, who was involved in that decision, what a good decision it was that he made and the person he put there, and how much it paid off with the operational value that it brought to what we built for a police station, what the town built. So in that aspect, there is precedent. With regard to the conflict of interest, I believe the chief was correct and we concur. The committee can only recommend. The only money that can be expended comes from this floor. It can only be voted by you and the town meeting members. The committee cannot vote anything. And the last thing that I will say, so there is no conflict that we see. The last thing I will say, just from my personal observation, the chief is right. For all of us, when we go to bed at night and go to sleep, you place your trust in those who are going to protect you. When someone stops breathing, when there's a car accident, whatever it is, these are the people who protect you. They do bring an expertise here that me having an expertise in public safety and operational expertise that is really necessary. Could you imagine building a hospital and not having a doctor having a voice in that? We built all new schools, and as Sheila articulated, the school committee had a voting say in that. The biggest project we've ever done municipally in this community. When they build a new courthouse, you can be sure that the judges and the lawyers have a say in that. This is not a power trip. If I thought there was a conflict, I would tell you. This is a good thing for this committee, and I hope, and I have great respect. Mr. Collins, I never really knew him. He is in this, sleeves up. I spent 2 hours with Brian Walsh this morning just working on this issue. They do a great job, but the operational expertise that Milton Fire will bring to the committee will only enhance all of us, and we urge you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Knoyer? Yes, yes ma'am. Please.
Priscilla Hayden Sloan, Precinct 10.
Could you say your name again, just a little louder, please? Thank
yeah,
you.
Priscilla Hayden Sloan, Precinct 10.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chairman Wells just alluded to a police officer serving on the police station committee, and that really was my question. It was for town council as to whether or not there were any constraints for a paid employee to serve in a voluntary position versus the school committee members serving on the school building committee as non-paid volunteers. So if that was a point of clarification to help people understand the conflict of interest. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, in my opinion, there's no prohibition against either of those employees serving on this committee if town meeting wishes to vote the recommendation.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Mr. Farrington?
Hi, Tony Farrington, town meeting member, Precinct 4, Board of Selectmen. I would like to echo the sentiment of Chairman Wells. I am speaking individually in my capacity as a town meeting member, but I would like to remind everyone here tonight that this article was submitted by the Board of Selectmen, and with all due respect to Webb Collins and to John King, your argument, I believe, would carry more weight and it would have more merit if this committee were limited to 3 members or perhaps even 5. But it's a 9-member committee as it stands right now, and this article is asking us to vote to expand it to 11. And I believe, knowing Chief Grant, that his knowledge that he's gained over the course of his career is valuable. It has insight, and I think that it should be formally incorporated into the committee. And I strongly urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Tony Cicchello, Precinct 4, Town Meeting Member. My biggest concern here is that we're here with this motion and this issue, and there appears to be such a dispute between the chief and the committee and others. It's inexplicable to me that we can't figure out a way to work together. Frankly, I'm torn as to whether the person, the chief and a representative of the department should be on the committee or not. But to my mind, it shouldn't make a difference because the committee needs to figure out a way to work together. And I hope people don't resign because this doesn't go their way, or they don't opt out of the process because it doesn't go their way. We've got a big problem. Everybody knows we've got a big problem. You and your men are in facilities that are just a disgrace. And there's no excuse for that. And we have to fix this problem. So my view here is vote your conscience here, figure out what you want to do. But I would hope that everybody involved in the process figures out a way to make the communication work. We need to know what the firefighters think they need, and then we're going to make all the hard choices that have to get made in this process. And it would be a shame if we would lose the expertise of Mr. King or others because of this dispute. So I would urge folks to figure out a way to make this work. Thank you.
Ms. King, do you wish to speak to this? Yes.
Jeannie Donahue King, Precinct 3. I'm married to John King, who just spoke. I heard him when he comes home from the meetings. I know what went on in all of the meetings. Listening to the last speaker, there has been a way of getting the firefighters' opinions on things. They have had lots of input. Both my husband and Webb Collins have said that. They have had not just citizens speak, basically it has been fire departments speak. They have an opportunity at the beginning, so if there's something that has come up that they're thinking about between meetings or something that they might not have been able to think through during the meeting and they want to address, that opportunity is given at the beginning of the meeting. And then they also have the opportunity at the end of the meeting to talk about anything that was discussed in the meeting or something else entirely different, as they also could at the beginning of the meeting. So I just feel that right now we're looking at this committee, we're giving them all kinds of accolades for what they can bring to this committee, but they're still being pushed out as the bad guy in all of this for not listening to the fire department. They have listened to the fire department. They have listened a lot to the fire department. In fact, one of the fire department people at a meeting said, "Why is it taking you people so long?" Now, it wouldn't have taken as long as it might have if they haven't been giving so much time to allow the firefighters to speak, and they have, and they've listened, and they've incorporated all that into it. So yes, they have found a way to get that input in, and I think that we should keep that in mind because this is a fine committee of people that have worked very, very hard incorporating the interests of everybody in town, not just the firefighters, but especially the firefighters. Thank you.
Mr. Grant, does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Before we let someone speak twice, we make sure everyone's spoken once. Okay, Mr. Grant.
I'd just like to address that particular issue. As those of us that are sitting in this room know, we operate under rules of order. And those rules of order are interactive. If you're part of this body, you can come down here and speak and have your voice heard. If you're not part of that body, you don't have that ability. Citizen speak is not an interactive process. There's an ability to speak at the beginning, there's ability to speak at the end. There's no interaction. They have been a little more, I've been a little more involved than that, but I've been involved as the chief for 10 plus years now, and as union president for 10 plus years prior to that. I understand those rules of orders, and I do not offer the input that I have. I'm there to answer questions. I'm there to respond when looked towards. For the fire department, this is not a truly interactive process. And again, we're building buildings here that are going to be in play for 100 years. All we're asking for is a seat at the table. We're not looking to change the direction. We're not saying that this is a bad board. We're not saying that we're at odds with this board. We're not. We just want to be part of this board. We want to have an ability to have our input heard in a timely manner and for a very, very crucial purpose for both us and you as the public. That's where we're at on that end of it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Stone, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm in favor of this article. I don't see what the big deal is, because we're increasing the committee from 9 members to 11 members. We're only adding 2 people from the fire department, and either member of the fire department cannot serve as the chairperson. So what is the big deal? We would get them to be really contributing members, as the chief just described. They can contribute as full members of an 11-member committee. So I don't see what the big deal is. I think we should vote for it.
Okay, seeing no one else coming down to the floor, this requires a majority vote. All in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. The article carries. Folks, I entertain a motion to recess till tomorrow night. Hold on. No, yes. Don't do it yet. So, folks, I think I called for a motion. All in favor of recessing until tomorrow night, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. I'm sorry, motion carries. We'll recess till 7:30 tomorrow night.